Commissioner Moskowitz.
Commissioner Persinger,
Commissioner Persinger is here.
Commissioner Jazinski,
Commissioner Jazinski's here.
Commissioner Bauer,
Commissioner Bowers here.
Town Manager Koenig. Your mic, sir.
I'm here.
Thank you very much. And the town attorney will be online, but unfortunately, the word didn't get to him properly from me that it was not going to be an in-person meeting, that it was going to be an online meeting. So he'll be joining us soon. Let's convene the opening ceremony, Pledge of Allegiance. If everybody would stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you all very much. I want you to know, folks, those of you that are not here in Dewey Beach, it rained like heck this morning. I would say something else, but I'm supposed to be polite. So it really rained here. Mr. Persinger, you missed it.
I did.
We had a hell of a downfall, to put it bluntly, and it was quite an experience. But I was telling everybody earlier, the project over at the little store. We have our town attorney connecting right now. Hello, sir. You have your microphone off, sir.
Good afternoon, Mayor. Sorry I'm late.
The town, oh no, that's probably my fault. I probably didn't explain it properly. But I was telling everybody that the project over at the little store actually worked beautifully. It was just completely overwhelmed by the amount of rain. And I'm not surprised that that happened, but we've got a little bit of work to do there. We have to do a little additional work. So Scott and I, the town manager and I, are on top of that project. Let's go with do I hear a motion to accept the agenda?
Motion to accept the agenda.
Commissioner Moskowitz moved to accept the agenda. Commissioner Bauer, I believe, seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye. Commissioner Moskowitz,
Aye.
Commissioner Persinger,
Commissioner Persinger, aye.
Commissioner Jazinski,
Aye.
Commissioner Bauer,
Aye.
all in favor, it's unanimous. And we've had the approval of the minutes, announcements, and update relating July 4th, regarding July 4th weekend. I think we had a successful weekend and no problems, but I'm going to leave it to the town manager to fill us in on what he thinks we should know and what he thinks important that happened on the weekend.
Well, I think things that were important from the 4th of July weekend, going into the weekend, we're expecting to have the fireworks. Those got canceled late. And there were some things that happened at Rehoboth with their face mask ordinance that I think really altered the amount of people that were planning to come to the beach. According to the chamber, there was some pretty drastic drops in temporary trips and stuff like that. But in general, the weekend traffic here and the amount of people I think that were at the beach itself, and especially on the bay, were significant. There was a lot of people in the area. The state parks, if I recall correctly, reduced capacity to about 60%. So that created, I think, additional traffic on some of the local beaches that were not able to get into the beach at the state parks. So there were no major incidents that were reported by the police department. We're still waiting for all of the parking numbers to come in, but it looks like there was roughly, say, $62,000 worth of parking fees that were paid to Park Mobile and the kiosk from the period of June 29th through July 9th. Those numbers won't actually hit our revenue books until early next month, but the kind of the polling of the system indicated that the parking revenue for hourly and daily meters were pretty strong, based on what I see right at the moment. The restaurants, I think, were concerned and are still concerned that the original statements that came out regarding closing the bars in eastern Sussex may have given a more an inaccurate message to visitors, whereas the bars weren't closed, only the bar seating was closed. So I think they tried to correct some of that messaging going forward. And I think people are returning to the restaurants. At least that's what it seems at this point. But the weekend, I think from a weather standpoint and activity at the beach itself was successful. Some problems, as I said, with late night activity being down. So the revenue associated with that is down. But in general, was a successful weekend.
Thank you. I agree with you, Town Manager, that the way it was put out to the press about quote unquote the bars being closed made everybody think the restaurants were closed. And I say this because I did a number of interviews and had to correct every one of the reporters that talked to me and to tell them that it was not true. It was just the bar areas in the restaurants. Nobody could be standing at the bar areas. So that drew a lot of people away. And then the new ordinance in Rehoboth that has since been rescinded really drove a lot of people away. And I understood that if the figures are correct that I got from the chamber, there was a 40%, immediate 40% drop in room rentals at hotels when those two items came out in the public, because they weren't explained properly. So really, really hurt the businesses and hurt the number of people down here. So there still were quite a few people down there. Like I say, the parks, the town manager told you the parks closed as soon as they got to 60%. They shut off entrance into the park. So a lot of people came here and or Rehoboth and the other beaches. All right, we'll move on. If nobody has any other comments about that item, move on to the CTF fund update in relation to the beach access map resolution passed on April 24th, 2020. I'm going to ask Paul, Commissioner Bauer, and Town Manager Koenig to address this item. Commissioner Bauer, before the town manager speaks, did you want to give us an update on that, on the mats?
No, I think we all want to move forward with it. That's what we discussed, as long as it didn't cost us any money. So where we left it at is we had to fill out the CTF paperwork, the application part.
Yep. So where it stands right now, we have to go to what I need to prepare is a kind of a spreadsheet measurements of each street, of what we would like to do at each street, so that I can get a cumulative estimate and number, and then get that to correspond with a quote from our vendor that we used. And then that documentation would be sent to the CTF people to finalize the CTF agreement for funding. And then once all that funding agreement is complete and a purchase order has been issued, we can proceed with purchase of the mats. Now, two things have happened out on the kind of on the beach area. There, the maintenance supervisor, Don, has done some work at the ends of a couple of the street heads to secure the end of the beach mat to almost like a small boardwalk, usually 6 to 8 feet long, to help with the transition from the beach mat to really to the edge of the pavement in some cases. What we're having a problem with is, I think it's mostly related to wind dynamics, maybe some erosion when it rains really hard and the water runs down the mats, and when the wind blows hard, there seems to be activity that basically bores out the sand at the end of the mats. There was a large step off in a couple of streets that Don addressed by building a small boardwalk area and then backfilling that with sand. And it seems to be very effective in the transition between the beach mat to some harder sand to the edge of the roadway. So my understanding of the discussion for the extension of the mats was twofold. One, the commissioners wanted to get a more sturdy surface from the end of the existing mat to the road. And then there are a couple mats that I think could be extended further to the beach. So those measurements all have to be formulated into a table so that we can get the accurate estimate for funding. And that's kind of where it stands right now. We need to do some work out in the field to measure everything and then get that stuff in a table and get it to DelDOT for final review.
Well, I just want to make a comment, and then I want to go to Commissioner Moskowitz had his hand up, but I want to really compliment Commissioner Bauer for the fine work that's been done on this project overall for a number of years now, and thank everybody that's donated towards those mats, including some of the commissioners here that have done that. Commissioner Bauer, you've done an excellent job, and it's been very well received, much more well received than I thought originally, and you certainly pushed this project through to fruition, and we appreciate it. Did you have any comment before I go to Commissioner Moskowitz?
Yeah, there was, didn't we have 2 streets, Scott, that we were talking about putting mats on as well that got missed before?
Yeah, so there on Jersey Street, there's a very narrow access to the beach. It's probably less than 5 feet wide. And it exists, at least from what we can tell from the property records, on private property. And I think we've heard, not directly from one of the property owners, but indirectly from one of the property owners, that they do not have an interest in putting the mat on that area. And that area, like I said, is significantly narrower than the other accesses. For it to qualify for community transportation funds, the funds have to be spent on public property or property that has a deeded access or a deeded easement. So we have not pursued approaching the property owner for a public access easement across the dune, mainly because I don't think they have interest in it. They haven't reached out to us for that. So that one does not have, we have not taken a measurement for that one. The second one, I think, is further down, and it is the drive-on access for the lifeguards and the vendor, the concession vendor, and also the grooming equipment when it's brought in from the road, if it's brought in from the road. So that street.
What street was that, Town Manager? Was that New Orleans or
Chicago.
what?
Chicago.
Chicago. Yeah.
Go ahead, sir.
So I've never seen discussion to put it on Chicago because of that very reason, that driving across it with heavy vehicles would be detrimental to the longevity of the improvement.
Well, before I go to Commissioner Moskowitz again, I'll ask Town Manager. I thought that you and Commissioner Bauer were going to get together and figure out the final plans to address wherever we were going to go with that. I'm worried about losing those funds. So have you all gotten together? Or are we?
Yeah, we've not had a field meeting, and those funds, to my knowledge, are not at risk at all. We just have to get the agreement tied down. So once they commit the funds, once they indicate that they're going to expend them, there is an earmark that they put in the DelDOT system so that we have time to procure the easements if we need anything, or agreements or anything like that prior to them issuing a PO.
Mr. Bauer, after the meeting, if you will talk with our Town Manager and get all that finalized, would that?
Get it finalized, get it done, and get it ordered.
Thank you, sir. Commissioner Moskowitz, go ahead. You had your hand up.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to correct. There's been misinformation that those streets were missed the last time around, and it's not correct information. With Jersey streets, the property owners reached out to me after that meeting, and one of them said specifically who has rights to it, he doesn't consent to the installation of the beach mat, and they're happy the way that things are. With the extra savings from not doing Jersey streets, can we bake in like maintenance costs? Because what it seems like is every year we have, people love the beach mats, but there's a maintenance cost associated with it. And you constantly have Don working on like fixing this, fixing that. Could we attribute how much time Don spends on beach mats and sort of bake in that maintenance cost as part of the infrastructure grant? So take the money you would have spent on Jersey and Chicago Street and use it toward maintenance. Is that feasible?
That's a good suggestion, but I would suggest that maybe that instead of a long discussion here in this meeting, that you also contact the town manager with your suggestions, but he and Commissioner Bauer will follow through with all that.
Okay, well, that's my suggestion, so.
Very
Thank you very
quickly,
much.
maintenance costs are not eligible costs underneath the CTF program, so they're not allowed.
Okay.
These are capital, they're typically capital purchases, and most of the time they're small item purchases.
All right, we
Okay,
could
thank
take
you.
it off- we could take that offline and do that. Thank you all very much. The next item is update on any amendments to HB. I'm sorry now, is it 349 or 439?
349.
439, Commissioner
No,
Bauer?
349.
349, and expansion of premises. Now, this was originally brought up, I believe, by Commissioner Bauer, but we asked the town attorney to look into it and explain the difference between our expansion of premises and HB 349. So, town attorney, if you could turn your mic on and do that. Very good.
Okay, so we have a zoning ordinance which has in, I think it might be table 2, a process whereby an establishment may request to expand their premises for a maximum of 72 hours. And there's a hearing required. Only council can grant that approval. That's been on the books for quite a while. And at our last meeting, we deliberated and amended that provision following a public hearing to allow for additional requests for public expansion in the off-season or expansion of premises. So the expansion of premises that are envisioned by the zoning ordinance reference use of, say, non-patron areas or parking areas for special events. And that's a process that we're familiar with. The HB 349, the bill that was referenced at the last meeting is a response to the COVID pandemic, which is designed to promote social distancing and at the same time allow for establishments to attempt to maintain their economic viability by opening and serving their patrons, but in areas where they would otherwise be prohibited from doing so. As I think was appropriately or correctly referred to, perhaps by the mayor at the last meeting, if not someone else, the Office of Alcohol, Beverage and Control, or the OABCC, I think it is, has a very strict set of standards that apply to their licensees that require them to submit and abide by floor plans that dictate what areas are patron areas, what areas are dining areas, where stand-up consumption is permitted and where it's prohibited. And these licensee establishments are not prohibited to deviate from that. However, unless it is pursuant to a zoning ordinance that grants a temporary approval. So what HB 349 deals with is not so much the zoning authority that we have. It just simply granted us the authority to on an emergency basis to allow for an expansion. So that's how those two different initiatives interact. I don't know if there's
So
some questions.
it basically gave statewide approval to all the municipalities to allow their businesses to expand for a certain period of time into a certain areas such as outdoor parking areas and yards, et cetera, correct?
That is correct, within certain limitations and during this period of time that the emergency has been designated or
Because
declared.
without that regulation, even if the town had wanted to, we couldn't do it on any more than 3-day basis like we have now. Is that correct?
That is exactly correct, yes.
Now, I had a hand up from Commissioner Moskowitz and a hand up from Commissioner Bauer. I'll go to Commissioner Moskowitz first.
And the way what we crafted, it automatically flows through. So then restaurants can have expanded outdoor seating till March 31st, subject to the additional rules of 11 p.m. and no additional outdoor music. And I think we passed one more thing requirement.
Thank
Correct.
you, Commissioner.
I'm asking
Go
the
ahead, I'm
solicitor.
sorry.
That's correct. Yes.
Is that you finished?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry. Commissioner Bauer.
Yeah, so what was passed moved everything back to the end of March. Do we need to do anything? I think when we approved it originally till July 30th.
That's correct.
So do we, we made it an administrative function by the town manager. Do we need to do anything else? And this is a question for Fred. Do we need to amend anything to continue that on to match up with what House Bill 349 states?
I can't remember the wording that we adopted as part of that. So that's a very good question. So it's something that needs to be considered. I don't know if someone here has the answer.
Ashley, I don't know if you can pull that up quickly.
Commissioner Moskowitz, you had your hand up?
Yeah, that's what I was referring to. We never used July 31st. We basically did it to the governor's period of his order. So we crafted it so that it would flow through.
Right, I didn't remember exactly either. Thank you. So Ashley will look that up. In the meantime, I agree that if it's to the finish of the governor's order or to the final days of the governor's order, then we don't have to change anything. But if it's not, then we'll have to address it at another meeting. Anybody else have any other comments on that item? All right, thank you.
Don't we have to make sure, we don't have another meeting before July 30th, right?
We haven't set one up yet. That's
Right. So we could settle this up just so we don't have a
well.
disconnect.
Can't have a vote, but I understand that I have not heard any commissioners say that they would not approve going forward to the end of the governor's order. So
I think it's been well received by both visitors and owners, business
I
owners.
agree, Commissioner Bauer, you're correct. We'll find that out and I'll address it with you all after this meeting. And if we have to, we'll have another meeting.
Okay,
All right.
thank you.
While Ashley's looking that up, the next item is update on fiscal year 2020 audit and potential audit committee meetings. I had written down next to this Commissioner Persinger and the town manager. Commissioner Persinger, did you want to address this first?
Let me defer to the town manager. I'm sure he's closer to this than I am.
Yep, so I've been talking to Ryan Ebner from Cone Resnick. We completed this week some small language revisions to the management, I think it's management discussion analysis draft. They're finishing up the numbers. My understanding was they were trying to get something to the audit committee maybe as early as either late today or early next week. And there's a tentative audit committee meeting scheduled for July 20th at 5 on the calendar. So they have completed all of their kind of financial analysis on the books. They're wrapping up a couple of small things related to grant questionnaires and stuff like that. And they've completed all the fraud related interviews that are required for the audit. And as of this afternoon, I haven't received any additional questions. So my expectation is they're wrapping up the draft and we'll be on track for a meeting maybe as early as the 20th, but we'll have to be scheduled shortly thereafter, if not on the 20th.
Thank you, Town Manager. Commissioner Person, do you have any other comments?
Just briefly, it is my understanding that they do have a meeting tentatively scheduled for the 20th. I thought it was 6 o'clock, but maybe it was 5 p.m. But we just need to double check that. Their intent is to try to it's going to meet on the audit report, and their intention is to try to get that report to us by the August meeting for final approval. So hopefully they can meet that schedule.
Thank you. Any other comment from any other commissioner on this item? Hearing none, we'll move on. Committee reports. Planning and Zoning Committee meeting July 5th, 2020. Commissioner Persinger, did you have a comment on that, or is the chairman going to be online to?
No, the chairman is not going to be online as far as I know. The committee, I'm sorry, there's a lot of feedback. I'm not sure where that.
Yeah, I'm getting some feedback here too.
The commission did meet on July the 5th. Unfortunately, that's the day after the 4th, and they met at 11 a.m. So the attendance was a bit sparse, and I don't think there was any public participation. But they are continuing to meet. They have a preliminary set of recommendations with respect to the NR zoning area, mostly regarding bulk standards and that sort of thing. Nothing really to put forward at this point. They talked a bit about a draft ordinance on dilapidated and unmaintained properties, but I think they're looking to the town for a draft on that. So I do not recall what their next I think their next meeting is scheduled, but I'm not sure exactly when it is. We'll have to double check on that. So that's
So the meeting from July 5th hasn't been posted online yet. Do you know the status, or does anyone know when it might be posted?
It's not on YouTube Live?
No.
Okay, well, Town Manager, if you could look into that or have Ashley look into it, or Ashley can do that and check in on that and find out exactly why, and because we have to have it online and the minutes for it, so, or the proposed minutes, I guess. Any other comments on that? Ashley, while we're going to you for public comment, before we have public comment, did you have an update on the I guess it was what you were asked to look up, 439?
So I can look that up, but it's on my computer, and if I get into that application, it's going to end this meeting. So I'll have to check into that, and then I can email everyone after this meeting if that's okay.
Thank you. I think here at the town hall, we're having a little bit of a connection problem. Commissioner Moskowitz, you had your hand up.
I just have some announcements before public comment.
Okay, go right ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank all the town employees, especially the lifeguards and police who are on the front lines. I think the restaurants have been doing a great job in town. There's a new restaurant in town, Fat Pennies, which is at the location of New Orleans and Route 1, which took the place of Dewey Beach Kebab. I heard Woody's To Go is going to be open potentially in the next week or two. So that's another restaurant coming to Dewey in the middle of pandemic, which is great things. On Route 1 in Reed, the bioretention facility is getting plantings done on Sunday. And I just wanted to add also the minutes. We skipped over the minutes originally. So we have to actually pass those from June 30th.
Thank you. We will do that as soon as I think, Ashley, do we have anybody online for public comments? Let's go to public comments first, and then we'll do the minutes.
Carol Everhart is on the line.
If we could remind them first, Ashley, before you allow them to come online, remind them they have 3 minutes.
I see them the same time.
Oh, sorry about that. Okay. Go ahead, Ms. Everhart. You have 3 minutes.
She's connecting to audio still.
seem to have a delay in connecting. Wait a minute, Commissioner Moskowitz, hold on for a minute. I'm afraid we might delay her even further if we continue to talk. I'm sorry, Commissioner Moskowitz, did you want to make a statement?
Yeah, I found the minutes from May 22nd, so when you're ready, I can read it if Carol connects first. Or what the minutes that were what Commissioner Bauer's question was.
Okay, we'll hold off just a couple more minutes. Ms. Hudson, is this normal? This connection?
I don't know. I mean, from her end, it's not connecting. There is one more person in the waiting room if you want me to try to bring them in.
Yeah, if you would switch over and then we'll try that first. Vince, hello. Vince DeFonso, are you there, sir? I see you.
I'm here. How are you? Can you hear me?
Go ahead. Yes, sir. You have 3 minutes.
Yeah, hi. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak to you gentlemen today. And as you guys probably know, I'm representing the Hyatt here in Dewey as well as a surf club. And just when I saw on the agenda, there was going to be an ordinance discussed today about masks on public beach in the public areas. And I saw it was exempt from beaches. I just wanted to give some feedback on that. And I heard you talking about businesses being down 40%. It was probably bigger than that. As you guys who are in Dewey right now could see, there's no one here. With the quarantine that the other states has given New Jersey, New York, Connecticut, our reservations, we've lost about $250,000 of business since then at the beginning of the week for July and August. The mask situation in Rehoboth does not help business. There's no requirement by the CDC. There's no one here. And I think with social distances, and I think with a lot of us in the restaurant business have closed a lot to really adhere to the guidelines and stuff, I don't know the need for that. And I think all that will do is just further prohibit our business. We have about 6 weeks left of the season, and we'd like to try to recoup as much as we can. 4th of July, as you guys said, was successful. I would say it was a disaster from a business perspective. And I would just hope we're respectively request that you look seriously upon us businesses that if messaging isn't done right, and as well as not sure really the need for that, would really like to oppose any type of ordinance in that nature.
Thank you, sir. Unfortunately, this is not a question and answer period, but do you have any other comments that you would like to make?
I'm good right now. Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much. Ashley, can we go to Carol Everhart? Is she still available?
I just got a text from Carol saying that she can't get in. Ashley, I just sent her phone number to you. Maybe you can reach out to her.
Sure.
Thank you. I do have a public comment that I was asked to read by one of our longtime owners, David Thomas. He says, my starting point and recommendation is that close consideration for adoption and implementation are the recommendations of the NYU Law School Brennan Center 2008 publication, Voter Purges, quote unquote, on their website. He's talking about the possibility of, as we go through the voter registration rolls, of purging the list when it's necessary. This will result in the election board open meetings and votes that will lead to product consisting of a published purge list established and governed by known criteria and so on, all part of transparent and participatory process of the election board acting as a group during noticed open meetings and the like. I may well not be able to attend tomorrow's meeting. I would appreciate your announcing what I have written here. And I believe town manager, did he also talk to you in general about this?
Yes, Mr. Thomas and I had a very long conversation yesterday, and he has many suggestions. He's got a number of ideas, and once the once the board begins meeting, I think he wants to participate. So
Thank you. Thank you
He
very
has a-
much. I appreciate it.
he also has a very good history and understanding of how the surf club works. And that has been a constant question mark, I think, for us in our voting roles.
Agreed. Thank you. And he's had numerous comments over a number of months about the way and possibility of if there's a needed purge of the rolls for people who have either passed on or moved out of town, passed on one way or the other. So, Ms. Hudson, did you have a comment from Ms. Everhart?
She was going to try to call right back in. So when she gets back on, I can motion to let you know that she's back on.
She's going to call back in? Okay, we'll go with that. We'll move on out of this section of public comment and start the actual items on the agenda. And then, Mr. Moskowitz,
We still have to ratify the minutes from June 30th.
thank you very much for letting me know. I appreciate that. The June 30th, 2020 Special Town Commissioner meeting minutes. Ashley had sent them out to you all. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
They moved Commissioner
Second.
Moskowitz. Oh, I'm sorry, Commissioner Jazinski.
I moved, yeah.
Yeah, is there a second?
Second.
Second from Commissioner Moskowitz, been properly moved and second to accept the Town Commissioner meeting minutes from June 30th, 2020. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll do a roll call vote to accept. All in favor, say aye. Commissioner Moskowitz,
Aye.
Commissioner Persinger. Commissioner Persinger, you have your mic off.
Commissioner Persinger, aye.
Commissioner Jazinski,
Commissioner Jazinski votes aye.
Commissioner Bauer,
Commissioner Bauer votes aye.
and Mayor Commissioner Cook votes aye. It's unanimous. All right.
But before you get to the agenda item, the minutes you want, that Commissioner Bauer and you asked to be read, I
Very
have
good.
them up so I can read them.
Go ahead.
It says motion by Commissioner Moskowitz to authorize administrative consideration approval of applications for temporary expansion of premise in accordance with Phase 1 of Delaware's economic reopening under the governor's regulations with the following restrictions. It should be on restaurant property and not on town property. No additional outdoor music. No increased seating capacity, and all expended spaces to be closed by 11 p.m. Seconded by Commissioner Jazinski. The vote carried unanimously.
So it did not have an ending date. It said it's subject to the governor's orders, correct?
Correct. That's how we crafted it.
I think that, Commissioner Bauer, I think that solves that. We don't have to do anything for that.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you both commissioners. And let's move on to item number 1. Ought to be interesting.
Dale,
Yes, ma'am.
I have Carol on my phone and she's just going to speak through my phone so she can give her comment because she's having a hard time connecting. But she's
Okay.
here now. Carol, can you speak?
Yeah, I've got another meeting, so I've got to,
Can you hear okay?
yeah,
Speak loudly, Carol
Yeah,
Everhart.
we can hear you.
you can hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much just for the opportunity to have a chance to speak and for putting up with whatever's going wrong here. I just want to mention that when they touched the ordinance and moved it from mask in public places with social distancing and moved it into the beach and other conditions on that ordinance, it had a very negative effect. And when I say that, I mean confusion, thousands of calls and emails from the visitors and the public about what it all meant. So I just stress to you that keeping it simple, CDC says wear a mask when you can't social distance. That message is clear and easy, and everybody seems to understand that. But when they put the extra conditions on there, that's when it gets really confusing, and it was definitely a negative for business and a negative for the visitor. So if, unless you have questions, I just wanted to make sure that I stated that and that you were aware of what that resulted in.
Did you want to one more time enunciate the position of the chamber on this?
Well, we would recommend that you follow the CDC guideline, which is wear a mask when you cannot socially distance and not add extra conditions onto that. So when you say all public places, as I read it, that could mean the beach too, and that's going to create a negative situation.
You finished, Mr. Everhart?
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you very much for participating in our meeting. We always really welcome the chamber as a member of our meeting.
Thank you.
Ms. Hudson, do you have the two items that were sent to you? The one, I'm going to read the agenda item here, but there's also a second proposal that was passed out today to the commissioners. So if I can read the agenda item, and then you could possibly read the two specific items that we're going to discuss.
Do you just want the titles of each of the ordinances?
Excuse me?
You want me to read the titles of each of the proposed ordinances?
Well, and yes, I'll read what we have here on the agenda, and then we'll move on from there to you, if it's all right with you.
Sure, but what you want me to do is to read the titles.
I want you to read the synopsis like we have of this proposal, and the synopsis from the proposal that was put out today by Commissioner Jazinski.
Yeah, Dale, just a quick clarification. There is no synopsis in the ordinance, so if she reads the entire thing, it'll take quite a bit of time because there's a lot of whereases and stuff.
Well,
so what I would offer to do is I could summarize both for each people.
Okay, that's good. We'll do that. Thank you, Ms. Hudson. Appreciate it. I'm going to read the item, then I'll ask Commissioner Jazinski to read the second item, the second part of it. The item that's on the agenda that has been published in up till today was discuss and possibly vote to approve an emergency ordinance to require face coverings while on public property, excluding the ocean and bay beaches within the town of Dewey Beach. And that would include all public property within the town of Dewey Beach, excluding the ocean and bay beaches. Now, Commissioner Jazinski, there is an alternative that has been put forward.
Yeah, so the alternative, just to make it clear, basically as close as possible, it follows what the existing governor's order is. And that order is basically that for people who are not in your household or part of your family, you have to social distance when you're out in public. And it follows that order. And the reason why there's an ordinance at all is the governor's order is interpreted as a criminal order, and that has enforcement implications. These orders are civil orders, which allow both the police as well as our code enforcement division to write tickets easily. So the basic difference between them is one says you must wear a mask while in town other than on the beach. And that's basically whether you're social distancing or not. And the other one basically says in all public areas of the town, which actually includes the beaches, you need to maintain social distance. And if you're not social distance, you have to put a mask on. And the latter one basically aligns with what the state already requires and just makes it a civil thing as well. The former one basically goes a step further in town, requiring masks all the time while in town. Is that clear? If anyone wants any clarification, I'd be happy to do that again.
I'll remind the commissioners that you just got an email not too long ago, a couple hours ago, giving the second proposed ordinance. And I'm going to read it. I've just pulled it up. Whereas in light of the foregoing, commissioners of Dewey Beach deem it proper and necessary to adopt this emergency order to require persons to wear face coverings while on public property within the town of Dewey Beach and to observe the minimal social distancing requirements. Number one, for the purpose of emergency ordinance, minimum social distancing shall mean, excuse me, maintaining at least 6 foot social distance from any individual who is not a member of the same household or caregiver to someone who in that household. B, face covering shall mean soft cloth, paper, fiber, or plastic covering that fully covers the person's nose and mouth. The terms include, without limitation, masks, scarves, and bandanas. Number two, All persons with limited exceptions noted herein shall observe and maintain minimal social distancing while on all public property, including the ocean and bay beach areas of the Dewey Beach, or alternatively, shall wear a face mask covering in all while on public property. 3, the act does not relieve any person from the obligation to comply with requirements to wear face mask coverings or observe minimum social distancing requirements in this or other public settings as may be set forth in the orders of the Governor of Delaware. The requirements of this emergency ordinance shall not apply to persons 12 years of age or younger, or any person who is unable to safely wear face mask covering due to age and underlying health conditions, or who is unable to remove the face covering without assistance from others. A person who fails to comply with this section of this emergency ordinance shall be guilty of a civil infraction punishable by a fine of $50. And it goes on to talk about the severability clause and emergency ordinance, the time it'll take effect, that we have to decide that today. So there are actually 2 ordinances that have been put forth to you. The one ordinance has said that require face coverings while on public property, excluding the ocean and bay beaches within the town of Dewey Beach. The other one does not require face coverings unless you cannot social distance of 6 feet, according to the governor's orders. Commissioner Jazinski, did I pull that together properly?
Yes, that's an accurate representation of the differences between them. Just for point of clarification, the latter one, though, if you're on the beach and you're having a large gathering, you're not socially distanced, you have to wear a mask. I just want to be clear with that with everybody.
It just requires what we require now, social distancing.
Yeah. Correct. Yes.
Yeah. And it would not require the one that was put forth this morning, the second one that I read, would not require face mask on the beach normally unless you cannot social distance. It would not require face mask on public property throughout the town unless you cannot social distance.
Exactly.
The original one that was put out would require face masks throughout all the public property in town, and would require face masks be worn on the beach. That was the original one.
No, the original one did not require the beach.
You're absolutely
All right.
correct. I'm sorry. You're absolutely correct. Commissioner Bauer.
All right, I'm confused. Which one are we going to discuss?
We're
It
gonna
sounds like we've got
discuss-
2 different things we're talking about.
Yeah, basically the only thing we're going to discuss is, do you want to require face masks throughout the town of Dewey Beach no matter what, and on the beach no matter what, or do you not want to require face masks on the beach and throughout the town unless they can social distance? So that's
So
basically.
Paul, can I try to explain to Paul
Go ahead,
why?
Commissioner Jazinski.
So Paul, why the second option is there is the state already has their existing regulations for when you have to wear a face mask. It's going back to it being a criminal versus civil. It's the existing state is a criminal thing, which is somewhat convoluted for the police to enforce and requires a lot more time and effort on their part to enforce. We don't want people to be heavy-handed, but we do want both police and or code enforcement, if they see a large gathering where people aren't wearing masks, to be able to say, hey, guys, you got to put your masks on or I have to start issuing tickets. Hopefully people will comply. If people are, kind of belligerent and they won't put their masks on and they're having a gathering, we need to give them an easy use tool to do it. And that's what this does. It's just basically allows them to issue a paper ticket if people won't put a mask on and they're refusing to social distance. That's the bottom line.
So I have several questions.
Go ahead. Commissioner Bauer, go ahead.
Yeah, several questions. All right, first of all, Fred, did you write either of these ordinances?
Yes, I did.
Both of them, okay. So you've read it from a legal standpoint. The enforcement section of this is going to be, if it's civil, does that mean our lifeguards can write those tickets?
Practically speaking, the lifeguards, I don't think will be writing these tickets. They will be charged with, protecting the public from the threats of being in the ocean. I don't think that's, I think it's possible. I think it's I think we could take the position that they're authorized to write these tickets, but I don't think that that's what would happen in practice.
All right, because the one ordinance didn't have a fine attached to it, and I think David's, the one you're talking about, the civil and criminal differentiation one, that has a $50 fine for it, correct?
They both do. I mean,
They both have 50?
they both have, the initial one is, subjects the offender to a fine of between $50 and $100. The latter one just makes it a straight $50 fine.
Yeah, I'm looking at, it didn't go over well for Rehoboth, from a business standpoint. I don't like the idea myself. If people are socially distancing, why are we requiring something that's, I don't know if is there some background on it? I mean, CDC, like Carol Everhart was saying, the CDC recommendations seem appropriate, but we want to go further in the CDC.
Well,
That's exactly what, I just want to respond to that. That's exactly what we're trying to do, Paul, Commissioner Bauer.
Commissioner Jazinski, go ahead.
Yeah, Commissioner Bauer, what we're trying to do with the latter ordinance is follow the CDC and the governor's orders, but use a civil ordinance so it's much easier for us to enforce. We're trying to basically use the exact same kind of requirements, which is you don't have to wear a mask unless you can't socially distance.
Yep.
Well, I want to.
So I can walk down the street, and if I don't have, as long as I'm socially distanced, I don't have to wear a mask.
Commissioner Bauer, you've
Sorry.
not been recognized. I was talking, so.
Sorry about that.
I just want to emphasize again, one says you have to wear face masks within all public places in Dewey Beach, including the beach. I'm sorry, not including the beach. I apologize. One, like I say, the first one says wear face masks in all public places other than the beach, and it includes a civil ordinance. It makes it a civil offense rather than a criminal offense, and it has a $50 to $100 fine. Am I correct, Mr. Townsend?
That's correct. And of course, you have the authority if you want to today and you want to support something that is very close to that, you can make an amendment to that.
Right.
And you could make it a straight $50 fine, for instance, if you wanted to do that.
Yeah, the second one suggests that you do not have to wear mask on the beach or on the other public places in Dewey Beach unless you cannot social distance. And it has a fine of $50, I believe, attached to it. Is that right, Mr. Townsend?
That is correct, yes.
So either way, both of these proposed ordinances would make the offense civil rather than criminal. Both of these ordinances would make it easier for our police to enforce. It's just the difference of whether we want to require face mask or not require face mask. So basically is what it comes down to. Mr. Townsend, go ahead.
Just another quick way to think of them distinctly is that the first one did not address social distancing. It just said the face covering requirement everywhere but the beach is established by that ordinance. The second one says, defines what social distancing, minimal social distancing is, and says you must engage in that. And if you can't, you have to wear a mask. So that's another way of looking at the two of them being different. The second one, if you choose to move and second that one and vote on it, it's going to need two small changes. There were a couple of stray words that you noticed when you were reading it, Mr. Mayor, at the end of line 3 of section 2. There are stray words in there. In all, those two would come out. And in paragraph 5, the reference to section 1 should be section 2. I apologize for that.
Well, we'll take that into consideration when we get your bill, sir.
When you get there, right.
Just
Oh,
joking,
my
just joking. So the town manager had your hand up originally. Go ahead.
Yes, I have, Marcia Scheck would like to make some comments. She's in the waiting room, I think, but she's having trouble connecting. So she just would like the opportunity to make comments on this item.
As soon as we finish talking about it, I'll get to comments with the public. I appreciate that. I'm sorry to hold her up, but I will definitely call on her through. Now, you know she's in the waiting room. Does Ashley know that?
Yes, I can see her in there.
Oh, okay. Okay. Well, then we'll work that through Ashley as soon as we finish our comments. Commissioner Moskowitz.
Yeah, for the second option, how does it affect people exercising, whether they're jogging or riding a bike? Is that exempted or?
It doesn't address it, if I understand it correctly, Mr. Townsend.
Yeah, well, if you're riding a bike, then you're almost invariably social distancing. So you would not be required to wear a face mask because in all likelihood, you're going to be maintaining a 6-foot distance. I can't imagine that you could be cited for violating the social distancing requirement in the second ordinance if for an instant or two you pulled up aside, too closely to somebody you're riding a bike with. And then the same thing for jogging. So long as you maintain the 6-foot social distancing, then you're not required to wear a mask under the second alternative.
I have a suggestion to sort of solve this and move this along. This was the item 1, the way I read it originally, to vote to approve emergency ordinance to require face covering. If we take that up and possibly vote on that and or pass it or eliminate it, then we can move on to the second item. So let's take the first item up. Is there a motion to discuss and
Wait,
motion to approve?
Trying to get your attention.
Yeah.
Excuse
Your
me?
mic is off, Mr. Persinger.
I'm sorry, Mr. Persinger, your mic is not on.
I do not agree with that approach. I want to make a comment on alternative 2 before we move on.
Well, okay, we have, I understand that you don't agree with the approach, and we could see if the other commissioners do, but we're kind of stuck here back and forth, and people are confusing the two possibilities of the ordinance. Either any of the ordinances can be changed as we vote on them, so or as we bring them up for discussion. Do the commissioners want to possibly bring up a motion to pass or disapprove what's written on the item 1 of the agenda? Does any commissioner want to bring up a motion to pass or disapprove item 1 of the agenda, that what's written under item 1 of the agenda? Hearing none, we'll move on. Commissioner Persinger?
I don't understand this at all. So I'm not sure what we're doing here.
Well, I think we know what we're doing, but we're confused because the second
I
item.
wasn't confused at all between these 2 alternatives. I read them both and I believe I understood them.
Okay. Oh, I didn't mean that you were
Go
confused.
ahead. Go ahead.
Would you like to give a suggestion on how to proceed?
No, go right ahead. You go ahead.
All right. Would any of the commissioners like to give a suggestion how to proceed or make a motion? Commissioner Krasinski?
Yeah, I mean, it's clear that Commissioner Persinger wants to offer some feedback and make some comments about one or both of these. And I think that he should get the opportunity to do that before we kind of do a motion to go in any direction.
Well, I just asked him if he had some comments, and Commissioner Persinger, do you have any comments you'd like to make at this time?
I do have some comments. I mean, this is a problematic process that we've gone through here. We've had for several days, we've had one version of an ordinance posted on the website.
That's correct.
Maybe 2 hours before the meeting, we have a second alternative, which no one's really had enough time to consider. I mean, I can comment on both of them. I'm not sure what's the best way to move forward here. It just seems like our process is a little disorderly. If you want me to do so, I will make a motion and we can consider alternative 2 if that's what people want to do.
Well, if you want to make a motion, go ahead and make a motion, sir. I will go to public comment before we take a vote, though.
Let me, I'm going to go back. I would like to propose that we approve version 1, the original version of this ordinance.
There's a motion to approve version 1 of the original ordinance. Again, before we take a vote, I'm going to go to public comment because I want everybody to be able to make their comments before we vote. Is there a second on the motion to approve version 1 of the ordinance? Is there a second? To hearing none, we'll move on. Let's go to public comment first before we discuss further.
There are 2 people in the waiting room. I'll let the first one in now. Looks like it's Marcia Scheck.
Marcia Scheck, please go ahead. She's connecting. While she's connecting, we'll wait.
And her mic is off, as you can see.
Marcia Scheck, your mic there. Your mic is on now. Go ahead.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. I really appreciate it. This is a really important ordinance, I think. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes, we can.
Dale, can you just confirm that you can hear me?
Yes, ma'am. I can hear you.
Okay, thank you. So, this is a really important ordinance for this town and for the health and welfare of the travelers here and those of us who live here. And I think that you have to look at all of our, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am. Go ahead.
Okay, so I can.
Go
Okay.
ahead, Ms. Scheck. Ms. Scheck, go ahead. We could hear you. Ms. Scheck, are you there?
Dale,
Yes,
so
ma'am.
there's some,
I can hear you now. Ms. Scheck, speak up.
Is it possible that
so Dale, something's happening that I'm hearing myself.
Yeah, don't look at your computer, turn that down and listen to what you're speaking into.
All right, hold on, I'm gonna turn the volume off.
Right.
Okay, I'm gonna try this again.
Yes, ma'am, we hear you well. Go ahead.
So I just want to say that
Go ahead. Ms. Hudson, do you have any suggestions for us here? Do you think you might contact her?
is she
Information. I'm happy to if someone wants to give it to me.
Excuse me?
I don't have her direct contact information, but if
No.
someone wants to provide it to me, I can.
it seems that she's listening to the broadcast of the meeting, which has a delay, and hearing herself is confusing her. If she
She
can,
said she was going to turn off her mic. Turn off
her sound.
Ms. Scheck, are you there?
I've asked her to call my cell phone.
Thank you, sir.
Hello?
Hey, sorry.
Can you, hold on one second, Marcia.
Can I just talk this way through your cell phone?
Yes, can everybody hear her?
Yes, go ahead.
Yes.
Okay, go ahead, Marcia.
Okay, so I just wanted to make a comment because this is a really important ordinance. We are at a time where 30+ states are ticking up crazily with this virus spread because everybody has let down their guard. All of our sister towns are requiring public masks in public. And I think it is a really good step
for us not to second guess the progression of this disease during a pandemic and err in a safer manner to require masks when you're on the public streets. I've been down here for a week and there's no one social distancing in Dewey Beach. It's really nice to see in Rehoboth that not only are all the people in public wearing masks, but even bikers and joggers are wearing them. Something I want to say about the CDC, it was updated July 7th, just a few days ago. The CDC says masks should be worn by everyone except 3 groups. And they are essentially breathing problems, children under 2, and I forget the other one. But what they said was, as cases of coronavirus continue to surge in parts of the United States, the Center for Disease Control issued an update guidance Sunday of who should and should not wear a face mask. According to the CDC, all people should wear face cloth coverings when they are out in public and around people who don't live with them. Emphasis, especially when social distancing isn't feasible. So what the CDC has actually recommended is that all people should wear it. The recommendation is based on what we know about the role of respiratory droplets play in the spread of the virus, paired with emerging evidence from clinical and lab studies that shows face coverings greatly reduce the spray of droplets when worn over the nose and mouth. The article goes on, and I'll share it with you, and I think before you pass anything, it's really critical that you look at the evidence that's been put out by the CDC, because you've had 2 people come on and tell you that the CDC is not recommending these. No, they're not requiring it. But they are recommending now, recently in this update, that this is the only thing that's going to stop the spread of this virus if all people wear them. Dr. Fauci said the other day, 2 days ago on TV in the White House press briefing, that if the only way we're going to stop the spread of this pandemic is if 95% of people are wearing masks. Masks plus social distancing will eliminate this short of a year from now us getting a virus. And I just don't think you can look at, I'm a business person, you can't look at my revenue and needs for business over the decimation of people in this town spreading this virus through droplets when they're not social distancing. I think it's really clear what the CDC is recommending, and it's really clear that this is a new update, that they're recommending all people wear face masks. I think that putting out the second ordinance, a second version 2 days before that people haven't been able to see is, it's not really fair to those people who looked at the first version and didn't think there was anything else to vote on. But I really suggest that you actually do your homework yourself and look at what the CDC is recommending, because between the White House briefings, Dr. Fauci's briefings, and the CDC recommendations, they want everyone wearing face masks. And I really, really hope you will support that ordinance. Time is of the essence in this. And I know that my renters, I don't know about the chamber, but across all of my properties, my renters want to know, do we have an ordinance for face masks? Because they're scared to death to be walking on the street and someone walks within a foot or 2 of them.
Thank you, Mrs. Scheck. Thank you very much.
Okay. All right.
I sincerely appreciate you taking the time and effort to call in. You really made quite an effort, and I appreciate that. Ms. Hudson, do we have somebody else on the line?
No, they signed off.
Excuse me?
No, they're no longer there.
Okay, thank you very much. I have a suggestion that may or may not work. I would ask, I'm going to ask you just one at a time. I'm going to ask you all a question, and it's not a vote. It's just what your thoughts are on this. Commissioner Moskowitz, I'm going to ask you, would you want everyone to wear face masks in all public places in Dewey Beach?
I believe I believe people should wear a face mask when they can't socially distance. I believe the second option is my preference. I
guess I apologize for interrupting. I misstated it. Would you want the town to require all people to wear face masks that are in public place, any public place in Dewey Beach?
If they can socially distance as per the second option.
Commissioner Persinger, would you like the town to require everyone to wear face masks in all public places in Dewey Beach?
I would like the town to do that. I would be also comfortable with a alternative in which face masks would be required only in the most dense areas of the commercial district along Route 1. But if we were required in all public areas excluding the beaches, I would be comfortable with that.
Commissioner Jazinski, would you like the town to mandate the use of face masks in all public places in Dewey Beach?
I only support mandating them when people cannot socially distance.
Thank you. Commissioner Bauer, would you want the town to mandate public face masks in all public places in Dewey Beach?
Same as David just mentioned there, the social distance, if they can't, then they have to wear a mask.
Well,
So social distance first.
okay, so you would not blanketly require everybody to wear face masks in Dewey Beach,
Correct,
but only if they can't social distance.
correct.
And I would say the exact same thing. I would not like the town to require face masks in Dewey Beach unless people cannot social distance. So let me go to my next statement. Commissioners, this is what I'll ask each one of you. Would you like face masks to be required on the beach? Commissioner Moskowitz.
Well, I think to simplify it, the second option, which says if you can't socially distance, wear a face mask, just have it apply everywhere. So it's simple. So
So, but the question I asked, would you like the town to require face masks on the beach?
if you can't socially distance.
Okay. Commissioner Persinger, would you like to require that the town or mandate that the town require face masks on the beach?
No, I would not like to mandate that. I would like to see the town invest some money in providing some staff to provide some people appropriate guidance on the beach to help them socially distance. I think the whole idea of can't socially distance when you can't socially distance is nonsense. The concept just makes no sense to me. You can always socially distance, just stay home.
Thank you, sir. That's a good comment. That's an appropriate comment at the moment. Commissioner Jazinski, would you like the town to require face masks on the beach?
I concur with what Commissioner Moskowitz said, and I support what Gary said, and potentially having people kind of guide people when it seems like they're not doing what they need to be doing to either socially distance or wear a mask.
Thank you. Commissioner Bauer, would you like the town to mandate face masks on the beach?
No.
Commissioner Cook, Mayor Cook says, no, I would not like the town to mandate face masks on the beach. And as an aside, I agree that I would like them to social distance, but I think everybody would agree to that. So we come down to that, we're not going to vote. It's not going to, Commissioner Moskowitz, you had your hand up.
Yeah, once you finish, I had one more question related to what Marsha Sheck had said. She said the CDC guidelines are for 2 and up, and we have 12 and up. And I just wanted to understand the rationale between the two.
Well, let's
Okay.
let's finalize something here of what we
Yeah.
might agree on. I think it looks like we might agree on not wearing face mask on the beach unless you, or not wearing face mask on the beach and requiring people to social distance. My comment to that is that Todd reported that he was having no problem with social distancing on the beach. When he saw the problem, when he asked the people to social distance, or the lifeguards asked the people to social distance, he had no problem with them cooperating and doing that. So that might relieve one issue. Mr. Townsend, would you like to suggest something that might get us off center here? A rewording of the.
Okay, so we're talking about having 2 ordinances here, but really we don't have an ordinance until we adopt one. I mean, we like to post our materials as soon as possible so the public as an opportunity to see and, what it is we might be voting on exactly. I do think there's a sufficient relationship between the second ordinance and the first one to have given the public notice that we are possibly going to adopt something that looks like the second ordinance. So if the second ordinance is the one you wish to use, then we need to add to it an exclusion that applies on the ocean and bay beaches, if that is the prevailing view of the group. Because at the present time, the form of the second ordinance does not exclude those two areas. So again, that's a question for the council to determine.
Mr. Townsend, I would ask that if you're going to quote the second ordinance, maybe you would mention the section and where it says and what it says.
Mhm.
And now, as I understand it, the second ordinance requires masks in public places only if you can't social distance.
If you're only, I guess, if you're not social distancing. I
Only
guess.
if you're not social distancing.
Right.
So as long as they social distancing, that mask would not be required in public places.
Right. So at paragraph 4 on the second version, you could include the phrase that the requirements of this ordinance shall not apply on the ocean and bay beaches or to persons 12 years of age or younger. However, if we were to make that change, it would apply to both social distancing and face covering. If we exclude the ocean and bay beaches from the face covering requirement, then the social distancing requirement would still apply on the ocean and bay beaches. Is that what this group might be interested in considering?
All right, I want to hold up 1 second. I want to personally apologize to everybody for allowing it to get to this confusing stage. It's my fault because I allowed the second iteration of a possible ordinance to be published today. It's what I would want. There's no doubt about it. The second iteration of the ordinance, but I should have let it be brought up here in the meeting, not published. It would make things confusing. Commissioner Moskowitz, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I mean, I don't understand. You have Route 1 and you're saying if you can't socially distance, wear a mask. Why would you give a different message on the beach? Because the disease, the COVID-19, if people are not social distancing on the beach, will spread. And it gives the lifeguards a tool if someone doesn't obey them. It's not where they're going to look to give tickets, but they can tell people, please spread out. If not, they can call the police. So why not just be consistent on Route 1 and the beach and the bay and say like the beach is it just makes no sense to be inconsistent.
Yeah, can I?
Commissioner Jasinski, go ahead.
Yeah, so I just want to say that, as Paul talked to Todd and I had talked to Police Chief Mackert, right now, when the police chief or Todd or his lifeguards are telling people to social distance, they're doing it. So the purpose of number 2 is just to ensure that if people are belligerent, that there's an easy to use tool to get them to comply. The feedback we're getting from our police chief and our lifeguard chief is that we don't have a big problem with people refusing to social distance. So from my perspective, I think it should apply on both the beach and in town, because it's really just as Commissioner Moskowitz pointed out, the virus doesn't really care. We just want to make sure people stay socially distant, or if they want to gather, that's fine. Just wear a mask, To me, it's pretty simple.
Commissioner Jasinski, that's exactly my thought also. And the only thing that has confused the matter is that I brought up, or I allowed to be brought up, a second ordinance, and we're talking first ordinance versus second ordinance. And I agree that it sounds confusing, and I apologize for that. We've kind of come to the agreement, or I see that we could pass an ordinance that would allow people to not wear masks or to wear masks only if they can't social distance, if they're not socially distancing themselves. And that could be on to include the entire public space, beach and town land included. Commissioner Moskowitz, you have your hand up first, and then Commissioner Persinger.
Yeah, just to clarify, like, I would like to do a motion just to see if we're on the same page and there's a second. I'd like to motion for the second ordinance to make the grammatical changes Fred asked for, to change the age from 12 to 2, and to specifically exclude jogging and bicycle riding.
This is Dave. Could I ask for a friendly amendment on that motion?
Yes.
Commissioner Jazinski, go ahead.
The state regulation is 12 years of age, not 2, and we're trying to conform to what the state's requirements are.
So strike that point and just do the grammatical changes Fred asked for, and specifically exclude jogging and bicycle riding, so there's no, and rollerblading, so there's no misclarity.
Is there a second to the motion?
Commissioner Jazinski seconds.
Commissioner Jazinski seconds the motion. There's a motion and a second on the floor. Commissioner Persinger, you had your hand up again?
Yeah, I do have my hand up. There's no question that what's happened as a result of the virus has really been devastating on people's personal lives, but certainly on the businesses in the town of Dewey Beach. The fact that Dewey Beach, or that Delaware, people coming from Delaware, or people who have visited Delaware and go back to wherever they're from, are being asked to quarantine themselves is terribly unfair. But it happened for a reason. If you look at the positive infection rate that Delaware is exhibiting right now, it's about 6%. That's not good. That's the WHO guideline is our goal, at least, is around 5%. We're above that. It's not 1%. That's where New York is right now. New Jersey, I think, may be in a similar situation. We have done, the state of Delaware has done a lot to try to control the virus, but it can do more. Rehoboth did more. Bethany did more. The town of Lewis did more. There's some variations. In some cases, the mask requirement applies throughout the town. In other cases, it applies just to the business district. But they have done more. What Alternative 2 does, that we're considering right now, for which we have a motion on the floor to approve, is in fact just allows the town public safety people to issue a paper ticket for someone who's violating what's already a part of the guidelines that the state has already issued. It does absolutely nothing for public health. It may have some marginal, minimal benefits, but by and large, this is not directed at public health. I think, in fact, for public safety, it probably makes things even worse. If someone wants to challenge a group of people who they say are not socially distant, you get an immediate argument. Oh yes, we were socially distant. They're not going to have a tape measure out there measuring the distance between people. If you had a mask requirement, that's a black and white requirement. It's very easy to see whether someone is wearing a mask. And if they're in town and they're not wearing a mask, that would be a very easy provision to enforce. This is not enforceable. And if you could confront a group, they may say they're all from the same household. There's no way no way to verify that. If you want to issue a ticket, you have to ask for ID. There's a long, complicated process here. I just think this does absolutely nothing for public health. Having said that, because it's the only thing on the table, it's something. I will probably vote for it anyway, but I think it's probably the weakest of all things that we could do in regards to public health and the effects of this virus.
I'm going to call on each commissioner to make some comments here, because I think it's very important. Number one, I'm going to comment. I am not in favor of requiring masks to be worn at all times in all public places, including the beach. I think at the very minimum, we should not include the beach on the public mask process. Number two, I think that that requiring masks on all public places, on all public property, including walking to and from the beach on the streets, including bicycling, including walking, and if I'm already 6 feet or 8 feet away from somebody else, I think it's ridiculous to require me to wear a mask. I carry a mask with me in my truck. I carry a mask with me because everywhere I go, every business I go into in a confined space, I have to wear a mask, and I think that's proper. I asked my doctor, who I went to the other day, and I've asked 3 doctors and got 3 different comments. The doctor I went to yesterday told me, hell no, I don't think we should wear masks, but he said, but I think we should wear them in confined spaces such as here in the doctor's meeting room. And so it would not, I think it would be a nightmare to enforce. I think it would be, could be enforced quickly, but we would be giving hundreds of tickets out and or arresting people that refuse to wear masks. And I don't think the benefits outweigh the negatives on that. So I'm going to go now to Commissioner Moskowitz to speak for your motion.
No, I just think consistent, whatever we choose, and we have something on the table, consistency is important. Like, for instance, Lewis said it is from 10 a.m. to 8 p.m. So what happens from 8 p.m. to 10 a.m.? Like there. So like it is important to be consistent. Rehoboth requires it on the beach. Then they backtrack, but they still require it if you can't socially distance. What we're talking about is something very simple. If you're 12 and up and you can't stay 6 feet away unless you're doing some bicycling or jogging, you need to wear a mask. And it's simple, and it gives our the law enforcement a simple tool to enforce it. I just think it makes it simple, and the messaging is easier. And perhaps we should also ask the town manager his thoughts as well.
I will as we go through the commissioners
Okay.
here. Commissioner Bauer, how do you see this?
You know, this is an enforcement nightmare, I think, for our police. And Scott, you know, hopefully you've had an opportunity to speak to Chief as well. You know, if we're going to require something, it needs to have teeth to it, right? I mean, if it's a role that there's no penalty for, then what are we going to do at that point? I mean, that's really, we're just saying we're recommending it. We've been recommending it. So I'm not in favor of requiring people to wear masks if they're social distancing. I can't make it any more simple than that. I mean, people are doing the right thing. They let them keep doing the right thing. Why are we going to make them do something more?
Commissioner Bauer, you do understand that that's what this motion would not require.
Right.
Okay. All right. I just didn't know the way. Commissioner Jasinski, you have a comment, final comment?
Yeah, so some of the comments brought up public health and enforcement. And I had spoken to Police Chief Mackert on the enforcement side over the past weekend. And, you know, he did indicate that having a civil ordinance that would allow them to write tickets would be beneficial to them enforcing people to wear masks who are not social distancing. So while not looking at this specifically, the general concept was something that he supported. He felt like it was another tool, and it's simpler than a criminal type of violation. You know, in terms of public health, my goal with this is to help ensure that both our residents and our tourists in Dewey Beach comply with the social distance and mask wearing requirements of the state. And my goal with this is to make it easier for the employees of the town to request that people comply. And if they do get somebody who's giving them a hard time about complying, have a easier to use tool to get them to comply. And so that, I hope, improves public health, because that hope improves compliance on people's social distancing, which is what we want them to do.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Persinger, do you have some last comments?
Again, my only comment is I think this is absolutely the weakest thing we could possibly do. If it is the only thing that we're going to do, I'll vote for it, but I think it's not enough.
Thank you, Commissioner. Town Manager Koenig, do you have any comments?
I have several. Going back to, and I'm going to back up a little bit, talk about the short-term rental ban. You know, people wanted us to aggressively enforce this, and it became a real problem for our staff to enforce. I do wish that there was a way for us to convert the criminal summons side of it to a civil penalty to enforce the governor's order. I think that would be useful to us so that we're not in the position of giving somebody a criminal record regarding any component of enforcing the governor's orders. When you get down to the face covering issue, again, these are CDC recommendations. I don't know if the governor's order actually required it or recommended it. I have some reservations about passing an ordinance because we're going to be caught between a rock and a hard place. People are going to say we're not enforcing it enough. When we start enforcing it, we're going to have some issues, I think. And I don't think that it's going to be as simple as writing someone a summons, depending on who we end up using as the example if we have to write a summons for this. I don't know if there's any consideration to, you know, passing a resolution to adopt the CDC recommendations so that we can be publicly on record that we want people to do this on a voluntary basis because it's good for public health, versus the punitive side of it where we're requiring it and putting ourselves in an adversarial position with, you know, people who are coming in from the outside, putting ourselves in an adversarial position with our business community and all that. It's very difficult to even fabricate a win solution on this for us. You know, we do not want to see the infection rates go up. Thankfully, at the moment, the hospitalization rate is reasonable, and I think the data on the latest round of infections is yet to be determined as to where that is taking us. But actually trying to enforce this is going to be difficult. And I see a lot of people being upset with enforcement or non-enforcement if we pass an ordinance. If we pass an ordinance, we will begin doing whatever we can to enforce it. But as far as I know, the state's guidance is still recommendations, not requirements. We're turning this into a requirement.
Now, any other comments from the other commissioners? I'm going to go to myself and then ask our town attorney a question. So I just feel that it's a no-win situation. I've had about equal amount of people call, talk to me, and or send me text or emails, not text, emails, and on both sides of this issue. Some people have complained and said, you know, why are the kids allowed to run up the street without face masks on? And I said, because the governor's order says they are allowed to do that, and we're following the governor's order. I've had people say, why are you trying to make us wear face masks anywhere in Dewey? That's not the job of a government to require health restrictions on their community. I think that's both to the extreme. Both of those comments are to the extreme. I would tell you that I believe no matter which way we go, we're going to have complaints. And I think we have to follow our heart on this and pass what we think we can pass what we think we can rightfully enforce, and pass what we think is good for the town and the citizens of Dewey Beach. Mr. Bauer, I'll get to you in a second. I'm going to now ask the town attorney. You've heard the motion to pass that face mask would be required only if someone can't social distance or is not social distancing. And that would basically cover everywhere in Dewey Beach, including the beach. And there were some restrictions that Commissioner Moskowitz put on that, and I'll have him address that before we take a vote again. But do you feel that you can address this properly in the ordinance?
Well, I think the ordinance is in fairly decent shape based on the comments I've heard. The one issue in the motion that is not currently addressed is the exemption for people who are exercising. So if that is the motion that's going to be voted on, I would want some clarity as to whether we are saying that individuals must socially distance in all cases, but if they're exercising and not socially distancing, they don't need to wear a face covering, I guess, is what is meant by that exclusion.
It is the maker of the motion, Commissioner Moskowitz, was that your intent?
Yeah, my intent was like, there's people jog or bike riding and they stop at the corner, but like to put on a face mask, like, basically I wanted to be clear, if you're exercising, you don't need a face mask. Basically, odds are you're moving, so you're gonna be moving away from people at the first opportunity.
So is there a way that we can say exercising? In other words, Commissioner Moskowitz, are you going back now and changing your motion?
No,
Excuse me?
no, I'm happy to amend it based on what the solicitor suggests to make it simpler.
Well, I would suggest then that you restate your motion as amended, and then we can have you, the person who seconded your original motion, either second it or not.
Okay, so I will restate, my motion is to approve the second ordinance with the exclusion being if you are exercising, and to approve the grammar changes the solicitor suggested, and for it to take effect tomorrow at noon.
And town attorney, I'll get to you, Commissioner Bauer, I promise. Town attorney, that includes the fine and the making it a civil offense, not a criminal offense, right? Because that's one of the major things about this. We want to make it a civil offense, not a criminal offense, because right now it's a criminal offense under the governor's orders.
Right.
So can you work that into the ordinance?
So again, we're requiring minimal social distancing while on all public property. And if you're not minimally socially distancing on all public property, you must wear a face mask or a face covering unless you are exercising.
Or have, and according to your ordinance, have underlying medical conditions or under the age of 12.
Yeah, what matters is whether what I'm trying to get at is whether the exercise exclusion applies just to the face covering or to the social distancing, as well as the face covering.
What is your intent, Commissioner Moskowitz?
Just to try to keep it simple. So if you're bike riding, jogging, or rollerblading, you're not required, and you're actually in that activity, maybe at a stoplight, like you don't need to just put on a face mask.
You're not giving us an answer, Commissioner Moskowitz. You said, what is your intent?
To not require a face mask for those activities.
Okay, well, we've already acknowledged that this is a difficult concept in its present form to enforce. So long as everyone understands that that's a further complication in enforcement, then the appropriate place to add the exclusion would be at the end of paragraph 2, where it's referring to the alternative requirement to social distancing, which is wearing a face mask. And you would be saying, for those people who are not socially distancing, but are engaged in exercise activities, they would not be required to wear a face mask while on public property.
Right. That is a change of the motion. Commissioner Jasinski, I believe you seconded the original motion.
Yeah, I will continue to second the motion as amended. Yes.
Okay. And Commissioner Bauer, do you want to make a comment?
Yeah.
Comment on the motion.
Yeah, here's where we get in trouble at. I mean, isn't walking exercise as well? How are we going to differentiate? Because now we don't want people to walk down the street, but you can run down the street. One day you have to wear a mask if you're going while you're walking, but you don't have to wear it if you're jogging, but you still run into the same corners. I like Scott's suggestion about this resolution as opposed to an ordinance, because I thought Scott made a heck of a lot of sense on that. Does anybody, can we entertain what Scott's saying? I mean, he's going to ultimately have enforcement.
We have a properly moved motion and a second on the floor. We're discussing that motion first. Town manager, you had your hand up.
No, my understanding is we have additional public comments that want to be made as we're making these changes or discussing changes. So I would request that at the appropriate time, you let people make additional public comment.
Well, what do you deem appropriate time, sir? Before or after the vote?
Yeah, before there's a
vote. I'm sorry, before the vote, sir?
Yes.
All right, thank you very much. Unless somebody has an objection, we'll hear go ahead, Commissioner Persinger.
Just a quick comment. I think the exception for exercising is totally unnecessary. I cannot imagine how if you're riding a bike or you're jogging, you couldn't simply be expected to socially distance.
All right, thank you.
Makes no sense.
Thank you very much. Ashley Hudson, I'm going to go to the comment section on this item, this one particular item, this motion that's on the floor right now. So if you could pull people up for us, please. How many people are there?
Kelly Ranieri.
Excuse me?
Kelly Ranieri.
Okay. Ms. Ranieri, turn your microphone on.
Can you
Go
hear me?
ahead, sir. Ma'am.
Hold on.
Go ahead, ma'am. You're fine.
I can't hear anything. Can you hear me now?
Go ahead.
We hear you.
Okay. So I'm good to go?
Go ahead.
Okay. Sorry, I can't hear a thing. So I just want to publicly comment, Kelly Ranieri, Dewey Business Partnership, that if we require face masks on the beach and in public, the same thing that's going to happen in Rehoboth is going to happen here. We're going to significantly hurt the economy, and we're already struggling. We need to learn from Rehoboth. Let's be a little bit more proactive. Why can we not have people on the street with masks to hand out like they do on the boardwalk in Rehoboth? We cannot crush this town anymore. People really need to social distance. I get that. We need to make sure that the public is safe, but we also need to make sure we don't crush this town and our economy. I'm getting phone calls left and right. Do we have to wear masks on the beach? No. Okay, great. Because we weren't going to come to Dewey if we have to wear masks on the beach. We need to really learn from Rehoboth and learn from their mistakes, but also learn from what they're doing well by having people handing out masks on the boardwalk. We don't have a boardwalk, hand them out on the street. And maybe it's time to start enforcing, cracking down on the loud house parties that are going on by the young people. So I think we can work this out. I beg you, do not implement masks on the beach. It will kill this town and the economy. Thank you.
Is that it, Ms. Ranieri? Is that it? Thank you. Thank you. Is there anybody else, Ms. Hudson? Commissioner Moskowitz, I'm going to ask you this question. As I understand your motion, you would not require a mask on the beach unless you are not social distancing.
Correct. And I just want to keep it simple so it's a clear message that's easy to spread. And in the spirit of doing that, I like to amend the motion to just choose the second ordinance, having the solicitor fix the grammar. Let's just keep it simple, make it easy for people to understand.
You have not made it simple for me, sir. That's correct.
Yes.
You have not made it simple for me at all. Commissioner Jazinski, Commissioner Moskowitz wants to amend the ordinance to say it again, Commissioner Moskowitz.
To amend the motion to motion for the second ordinance, just having the solicitor fix the grammar and for it to take effect tomorrow at noon.
Well, I will ask you to read your motion then, because I am confused now.
So motion for the second ordinance with the solicitor fixing the grammar, and that for the ordinance to take effect at noon tomorrow.
Well, I'm not going to let us get away with that simple. I'm going to ask somebody to read the entire ordinance that you are motioning to include right now. And
I can read it if you want, Dale. It's going to take me like 5 or 10 minutes.
Commissioner Jazinski, you've been seconding the changes of the motion. We're now back to the original second motion. Do you agree with the change?
I agree with the change. I would ask that the solicitor, just for clarification, points out the technical changes that he wants that need to be included.
Go ahead, town attorney.
Mr. Mayor, I can do that, or I can read the ordinance with the changes that.
I would like, the commissioner has asked to go back to the original ordinance. The seconder of the motion has agreed to second it again. So we're back to the original ordinance. If you would read the original ordinance that you want us to pass, or that the commissioner wants us to pass.
Well, it's my understanding that it's the second iteration of the ordinance that is.
Correct.
Not, okay. So I don't think there's any need to read the whereas clauses, correct? We just need to read the body of the ordinance.
Well, there's one whereas clause that concerns, I believe the last whereas clause makes a statement about. Go ahead, sir. You do as you feel is correct.
For purposes of this emergency ordinance, minimal social distancing shall mean maintaining at least a 6-foot social distancing from any individual who is not a member of the same household or a caregiver to someone in that household. B, face covering shall mean a soft cloth, paper, fiber, or fabric covering that fully covers a person's nose and mouth. That term includes without limitation masks, scarves, and bandanas. Paragraph 2, all persons with limited exceptions noted herein shall observe and maintain minimal social distancing while on all public property, including the ocean and bay beaches of Dewey Beach, or alternatively, wear a face covering while on public property. 3, this act shall not relieve any person from the obligation to comply with the requirements to wear face coverings or observe minimal social distancing requirements in this or any other public setting as may be set forth in the orders of the Governor of Delaware. 4th, the requirements of this emergency ordinance shall not apply to persons 12 years of age or younger, or to any person who's unable to safely wear a face covering due to age, an underlying health condition, or who is unable to remove a face covering without the assistance of others. Paragraph 5, a person who fails to comply with section 2 of this emergency ordinance shall be guilty of a civil infraction punishable by a fine of $50. And paragraph 6 is your severability clause. Paragraph 7 is the effective date, which is proposed to be noon on July 11th, tomorrow.
That is the motion that, go ahead, sir.
And just lastly, that this provision expires automatically after 60 days, 61 days, unless you all take the subject back up again to extend it. That's the way it's currently written.
Okay. You have just heard the motion that is on the floor with the proper second. I'm going to call the roll unless you want to make one last comment. Fine, I don't want any comments either. Not at this stage. We've changed it enough. Commissioner Moskowitz, how do you vote?
Aye.
Commissioner Persinger, how do you vote?
Reluctantly, aye.
Commissioner Jazinski, how do you vote?
Mr. Jazinski votes aye.
Commissioner Bauer, how do you vote?
Vote no.
Commissioner Mayor Cook votes aye. I think it's the proper thing to do. The motion passed 4-1. Thank you all. Let's move on to the next subject. Discuss and possibly vote to sell dog license on the town website. Town manager, will you make some comments on how you've worked that out for us?
I would defer to Ashley if she has any updates. We've been working with our vendors to see if we can get any progress on this. And the website is supposed to be upgraded, but it has been delayed a couple of times, I think mostly due to COVID issues, but I'll defer to Ashley for a minute.
Go ahead, Ms. Hudson.
So I reached out to the website company. They're not able to implement through Edmunds to the software we thought we were going to be able to use. So authorized.net is who I reached out to, and they're getting a plan together to provide us with a quote of how much it would be to be payments online. And as soon as I get that, I can send that out to everyone.
Ms. Hudson, how long do you think this could possibly take?
They were supposed to have it to me by the end of the day yesterday, and then it got pushed to today. I haven't checked my email since this meeting has started, so I may have it today, but I would imagine I should have it by the end of today.
Well, it seems like we don't have anything to vote on then. Commissioner Moskowitz.
Well, if we have a ballpark number, we could authorize the town manager to have discretion of under like $3,000 or so. Like, would actually may already fall under his discretion to just go with the option, because once it's paying money to make money. So is there any ballpark number?
Ms. Hudson?
Not that I've been provided.
And so would I be able to ask the solicitor, what purview does this town manager have if it's under 3,000 or 5,000? Can he just do it?
It's under 2,000.
I believe it's 2.
Yeah, it might be 2. We've, I believe our subcommittee has made recommendations with regard to bumping that standard up, but that's not been made effective yet.
So would we be able to make a motion that the town manager would have authorization to pursue it under 5,000 if we wanted to speed this along?
You can, you declare this a project of the town managers, and with your authorization, you can exceed the $2,000 ceiling.
Is there any commissioner that wants to make a motion on this?
I'll make a motion to. So what can Ms. Hudson just repeat that what they were asking the vendor to do, and which?
We're just waiting on a quote to find out how much they will charge to get the licensing implemented, and then if they're going to charge a monthly charge based on how much we receive in revenue, what their percentage would be to charge us.
Quick question.
Go ahead, Commissioner Jasinski.
Do you have any idea of the time it will take them to implement that and when it would be live from the time you get the quote, or do you not even know that yet?
I did ask them that. They said within a week that they can
Okay,
have.
so they can do it pretty quickly. All right. All right.
So would I be able?
Go ahead.
Yeah, would I be able to make a motion to authorize the town manager to pursue an online dog license and have discretion up to $5,000?
There's a motion on the floor, properly moved. Is there a second? Commissioner Jasinski, are you seconding?
No, I'm not.
Well, we need a second to make an additional comment. There's a motion on the floor. Is there a second? Calling for a second for the last time. There's not a second, the motion fails. Well, the motion is not live. Mr. Townsend, motion doesn't fail. It's just not not an active motion, correct?
Interesting question. I mean,
Oh, that's all right.
I think it's fair to say that the question fails.
Okay, thank you. Is there any other motion that anybody would like to make on this subject? Okay, then we'll move on to item number 3. Discuss and possibly vote to authorize early payoff of the Bayard Avenue loan to save money on interest payments. Town manager, this is your baby. Go ahead with it.
Thank you. This is a follow-up discussion from January of 2019. At that time, we owed about twice as much as we do right now. As of now, this is for the Bayard Avenue loan, and the loan was through the Department of Natural Resources, Environmental Finance. And if we pay off the loan now, we would pay $77,408.71. The maturity date of this loan is September of 2021, and we're currently paying about $4.26 a day in interest and rate fees for this, for the outstanding balance. When we had this discussion before, we were under a little bit different financial climate, and I think we did not consider all of the information because, one, I didn't have all the information at the time. So this loan is paid out of the street and infrastructure account. It has always been paid out of that account, evidently, and that account currently sits at Fulton Bank as a separate bank account. And one of the discussions we had, and we talked about this the last time, was that Brown was earning interest at a higher rate, and that it was more advantageous to leave this money invested in the short term with Brown. As it turns out, this payment does not come out of the Brown advisory money. It comes out of the Fulton Bank account, which is earning very little interest at this point. And from a cost savings of, if you look at the long term of this, by paying it off now, we would save the interest payments between now and September of 2021, and a little over a year of interest payments. And this money would be coming out of the infrastructure account anyway, if we waited and did the payments on the approved schedule. So the staff recommendation, or my recommendation, is that we that I request to you guys to vote to authorize the payoff. It would essentially bump up the expenditures for this fiscal year under this line item. And but the loan would be paid off on or about the 17th of the month.
Hold on one second, Commissioner Moskowitz. I'll get right to you. Town manager, you said the figure that was the payoff was 77,000 what?
77,408.71 if we pay it off by the 17th of the month.
Commissioner Moskowitz.
Yeah, originally we didn't do it because the interest rates were high. Now interest rates are down, but we have a different situation. There's a pandemic and we may need to borrow money we've been talking about, or doing other things. We have a loan that has 1 year left with a very low interest rate. Why would we pay it off if at the last meeting and meeting before that we're saying, hey, we may borrow money, and now all of a sudden we're like, oh, let's pay off our low interest loan. The loan has 1 year left, and it just makes sense to just let it expire. I think it's the 2% interest rate. Just utilize that rate and just let it be. I understand there's an infrastructure account and there's different accounts and segmentation, but it just makes sense to just leave it on the books. And if things get bad with COVID-19, we have some extra money without having to go through a loan process. And if things go good, it gets paid off anyway in a year.
All right, thank you, Commissioner Moskowitz. I just make a comment that I think it's probably a good idea to follow through with this. I thought so the last time, and because of various situations, I agreed to not do it, but I think now's the time to do it. I think it's the proper move to make. Go ahead, Mr. Koenig, go ahead.
My only thing that I would like you to consider with Commissioner Moskowitz's comments are that the infrastructure account, that money can't be used for anything unless you had a public hearing on it. And I think this is the last money that we would use for any type of bridge loan or anything like that. So in my opinion, the more appropriate approach would be to pay off the loan, save the interest, and then begin building the account back up.
Hold on, Commissioner Moskowitz. Commissioner Persinger, and then Commissioner Jazinski. Go ahead, Commissioner Persinger. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, did you recognize me?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir.
Okay. Sir works better.
We demonstrated twice now, once with you, once with Ashley.
Yes. This is a very different situation than we were presented with in January of 2019. At that time, the proposal then was to pay off this loan by taking the money from general fund revenues. And as the town manager pointed out, we can invest those funds, and we in fact have invested those funds with Brown Advisory. We actually, I believe, have made more in interest than we have paid in interest on the loan over that period of time since January 2019. As the town manager pointed out, this will come out of the streets and infrastructure account. It can be used only for that. That's where the loan has been paid for in the past. We did not understand that fact when we considered this in January 2019. We would save, I believe, between $1,100 and $1,200 in interest just by paying this off. I think it makes sense to do so, and I would offer a motion to do so.
Well, okay, there's a motion on the floor then. I would like to go to Commissioner Jazinski first. He had his hand up, and then we'll go forth with that motion. Commissioner.
Sure. So, yeah, so the interest on this loan over the next year is $1,500. And even if that money, that $77,000 is only earning 1%, the difference is basically $750. So, you know, our town manager is making a good point that this is infrastructure money and that's kind of separate. But kind of here's my kind of thought process. In 3 or 4 months, we've kind of gone to, you know, the basement and part of the way back on our budget outlook. And the situation with what's happening with the pandemic is very fluid. And while I think we all think that a hugely disastrous budget year is now becoming unlikely, there's still the possibility that things could not work out the way we want, right? It's still a real possibility. And for a net $750, I'd rather just buy the year and be able to pay it off when the balloon comes due, and just know that that's just one additional bucket of funds that we have. That's kind of my view.
Commissioner Bauer, I'm sorry, I take that back. We have a motion on the floor. Is there a second for the motion? Is there a second for the motion? Commissioner Bauer.
Yeah, can we go back to what the original motion is here? Reread it.
Koenig, oh no, I'm sorry, Commissioner Persinger made the motion.
My motion is that we approve the town manager's proposal to pay this loan off from infrastructure money.
All right, there's a proper motion and a second on the floor. Commissioner Moskowitz.
Yeah, so if this money is coming from infrastructure, do we need a hearing in order to have this? Because it's coming from general fund or infrastructure fund? So
Commissioner,
wouldn't we need a hearing, a proper hearing in order to pay it off?
that's correct. Town manager.
I don't know that they didn't have a hearing when they originally did this, but every loan payment for the Bayard Avenue loan has come out of the infrastructure fund when you actually look at the history of the payments.
Mhm.
So I think they may have had a public hearing back when they did the original loan documents.
Commissioner Persinger.
Yeah, I would just ask a question that just this is an amortized loan, so the interest would not be $1,500. It would be closer to $1,100 or $1,200 that we would save, just to be clear. But I would also be very surprised if we were getting 1% on the infrastructure account from Fulton Bank. And I would ask the town manager, do you have any idea how much interest it is generating?
I do not know off the top of my head, but I would strongly believe it's less than 1%.
I think the last time we talked about it, I believe it was 0.5. I'm not sure about that, but I believe it was 0.5. I would suggest that we could, if we pass this motion, the only thing that could hold it up, we could instruct the town attorney to check, see if a hearing was held. And if it was, then it would hold for this. And since everyone has been paid out of that account, my guess is a hearing probably was held, but town attorney.
Well, I think a hearing was held, but I think it's the whole notion of the loan is that the proceeds or the payments to be made on the loan are from that account. And that would include the balloon and all the interest in between. So I don't think there's a public hearing requirement to pay this loan off early. That I feel pretty strongly about that.
Commissioner Moskowitz.
Yeah, so what is the balance on the infrastructure account?
It's in the paperwork that you were sent. Mr. Koenig could say it.
The June 30 balance, the roughly was 651,700, 671,671.19.
And the payoff for the loan is 77,408.71.
Yes.
So
$52,000 of which would have come out of this budget anyway. roughly.
All right, it's properly motioned and second on the floor. Is there any further discussion, Commissioner Persinger?
The only thing that bothers me at all about this is what the town manager said about how this would be accounted for. That paying off this loan would show up on the expenditure side. We have to find some way of fixing this. That is stupid accounting. I'm sorry to be blunt about it.
It's the proper word.
Makes absolutely no sense to take it out of one fund and then put it and charge it against the general fund. No sense at all. Please go talk to the accountants and fix this.
Thank you. Any further comment before we hold the vote? Commissioner Moskowitz?
Yeah, I understand we have segmentation of accounts, but I don't understand how we're saying we may have to borrow money and we have a big budget deficit, which will be the next item. But then in this thing, oh, let's pay off our low interest loan early. It just, I believe it's a bad strategy and it's very little gain for paying something off out of savings that in a year it's going to be paid off anyway.
But, okay, thank you, Commissioner. And I would call Commissioner Bauer next if he has a comment, but I want to make a comment, say, no matter what, it saves us money. No matter what, paying it off saves us money. Commissioner Bauer?
I always feel better when I don't owe people money, so pay it off.
Okay, I'm going to call the vote. Commissioner Moskowitz?
Nay.
Commissioner Persinger?
Commissioner Persinger votes aye.
Commissioner Bauer?
Aye.
Commissioner Jazinski?
Vote nay. I'd rather have the money in reserves.
I'm sorry, what?
Nay, I'm voting nay.
You're voting nay. Commissioner Mayor Cook votes aye. The motion passed 3-2. Next item on the agenda. Discuss June financial reports and COVID-19 budget scenarios. Scott, do you want to take the lead on this?
Yes,
I'm sorry, Town Manager Koenig.
yes, please. The June 30th financials have been posted, and just a rough review. Our revenue for the month was roughly $338,110. Our expenses for the month were roughly $384,779. So we had a negative balance of about $47,000. If you look at that based on budget, we were expecting about a $40,000 negative balance. So we're tracking generally close to budget. Our revenues were up in some cases, especially related to accommodations tax, but these are carryover taxes basically, I think, from last fiscal year. If you look at year to date, again, our revenues are tracking above historic averages in transfer tax, accommodations tax, business licenses. Some of that, again, I believe is related to, as far as transfer tax, it's receipt, times of receipt, not much rhyme or reason to it based on sales. The accommodations tax and business licensing are taxes that in some cases would have been received in March, came in after that, which are driving up our numbers a little bit. And then people have been remitting taxes that I think were from a prior period regarding accommodations tax. The parking permits, we've hit about 85% on seasonal parking permits, and they're still trickling in. I would say we'll probably end up, based on what I see right now, somewhere between the 86 and 90% range on seasonal permits. So there is a slight deficit on that revenue. What is lagging behind right now are meter and daily parking permits. We're starting to get those revenues in, and they will actually post in the month of July. The DBA income is high because we got a $100,000 payment that was unplanned in the budget, but it was due according to the MAR. And if you look at the bottom under set asides, we're affording for the set asides. If you look at the landscape page, that includes the monthly, the year to date, the budget expenses. Year to date, we're at roughly 96% of our budgeted revenue. However, that includes that $100,000 extra payment from DBE. And we're running at about 101% of our expenses. The 101% of expenses is being driven by some additional issues that are carryover from last year. In some cases, the police recording equipment that we authorized last year was paid for in the June budget for a little under $14,000. We had a bunch of special duty for the police department in June, roughly $12,800. That is related to the highway work that was done here and the contractor securing the services of the police department to basically sit there and run emergency lighting while they did certain activities. That $12,800 is reimbursable to us, and that revenue will probably show up in either July or August once the contractor reimburses us for those expenditures. We also bought beach wheelchairs for roughly $6,700 that hit the lifeguard budget, and we're starting to collect money in for the offset of those costs. If you look at our internal COVID-19 expenses, they are charged to different parts of the budget, such as the cleaning of the interior police department, the fogging of the building. We have probably close to $35,000 of expenses that have been tracked on a spreadsheet that we will be seeking reimbursement from either through law enforcement grants or other grants related to the COVID-19. So those expenses are being carried in the expense line item, and that is one of the things that's driving the expenditure slightly over budget. So from a budgeting standpoint, year to date, we're still conscious of the things that are happening with COVID-19 related to revenues, and I'll discuss those again separately on the COVID-19 scenarios. But we're continuing to monitor expenses, and from an actual revenue standpoint, revenue to expenditure standpoint, we are still positive year to date by about $53,000. So I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Town manager, I have a couple questions. What I call set aside, but it's actually expenses authorized in one year and paid in the next year. We've had this off and on for as long as I can remember on this council. Sometimes we addressed it by setting money aside and the auditor said that was okay. And sometimes that wasn't okay. What's the deal? Why can't we set aside money and expenditure in, excuse me, in last year? And because we couldn't get it last year, we expended actually this year. Why can't we set it aside in a restricted account or something to that effect and not have it count towards the present year's budget?
Some things are accounted for like that through the issuance of a purchase order. If we had a purchase order system, like a formal purchase order system in a financial system, we don't have a formal purchase order system to reserve that money the way we use QuickBooks. So I'd have to ask the accountants if there's a way to do that. But I know in some cases you have projects that are in progress. You authorize them in one year and they carry over into the next year. We're having that issue with the infrastructure project for the GIS system. I think we got final bills in after April 1 for that first phase. So those expenses are being carried on here. In some cases, it may be that we have to adopt a special separate budget for capital projects. And that way, the money just doesn't expire at the end of the fiscal year. You have to rebudget it. So in some cases, we may need to do just a budget amendment to take money from the general fund ending balance and reappropriate it as an expenditure for the fiscal year, the current fiscal year.
Well, town manager, I would add my vote to the word stupid. that was brought up by Commissioner Perkins before.
I never said that.
Obviously not addressing you, town manager. We know that, it's just a foolish way of doing things and quite appropriately called stupid and once before. And you now have two items that you need to address with the auditors. Second question I have is, what's the scoop on the beach concession contract on payments there? I know we had delayed some payments because we sort of had an odd opening of the beach in the beginning.
So for the last several years, prior to my tenure, I think the vendor actually worked out. The contract says June 15th, but the vendor typically makes the first payment on July 1, and that payment was made on July 1. So we have the first payment. It shows up in the July revenue, and then he makes 3 additional payments after July 1.
Got you. Thank you. That solves the problem. And I want to ask again and just remind the other commissioners, you say we've got about $35,000 worth of COVID-related payments that have already been paid out on the budget. And I understand, if I understand our call-ins correctly with the governor, some of that money can be retracted from or taken out of funds that are given the counties and municipalities related to COVID. Is that correct?
So the only county in Delaware that got money was Newcastle County right now. The police department.
Bless you.
The police department has several grant applications that relate to COVID-19 expenditures that they have started filling out, and we are expecting to be receiving money through DEMA, but it's under the law enforcement area. There is not a general government grant yet, and that's something that's being debated, I think, at the federal level. And so there may be some general government grant opportunities to offset some of that $35,000 expense.
Well, as I understood it, they will not cover lost revenue, but they will cover additional expenses directly related to the COVID health crisis. And the state would have to put in for those funds for the overall state, and then they trickle it down, so to speak. Do you think there's any talk of that in Delaware?
I think there is some talk of it. There appears to be some type of first responder money available that the police department is working off of through some of the legislation. So they have PPE that's been purchased. They have cleaning supplies. We have cleaning supplies. They have cleaning of the building. So they are in the process of making application to at least reimburse the police component of those expenditures right now.
Cleaning expenditures, yeah.
The cleaning and PPE,
Right.
PPE expenditures.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments from the commissioners? Seeing none. Commissioner Moskowitz. You have your mic off, Commissioner.
Yeah, so with the beach wheelchairs and the donations, I really would hope the town would consider GoFundMe. That would make things seamless and give property owners who are not approached, but like it uses the internet and social media, a chance to donate money, and we could quickly get the funds necessary. Because I mean, we're doing it a legacy way, and GoFundMe is just a new standard to get money.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Ballard, you've really made a push on raising funds for the town, and I for one certainly appreciate it. You did a great job on the match. Were you going to be working on the beach chairs also? I thought your mic is off, sir.
Yeah, we're trying to make get some donations, and Ashley put something on our website. I'm not sure do you have an update on that? What we've gotten in?
So far, we've received one donation of $100.
Okay, so is there anything else you might want to say at this time? Anybody listening might want to donate? Commissioner Bauer?
It's for a great cause. I'd like to have people do it, but honest with you, I think our businesses are struggling right now, and I don't think that's a secret. So, asking them for money right now is a bad idea. And the state doesn't have a whole lot of money as well, unless you were queued up to get it before.
I got you. Is there any chance on the community transportation funds on that aspect of it? Possible.
I can try another one on that one. Scott?
Yeah, I'd have to look at the expenditure allowances and see if that's something that would qualify. It may be something that qualifies.
Thank you. Any other comments from any other commissioners? Do you want to move on to the next subject or?
So in the packet information is the current update of the COVID-19 scenarios. On the expenditure side, not a lot has changed right now because the information that we discussed on June 30th was pretty much the June 30th expenditure information. On the revenue side, we have confirmed basically the first 3 months of revenues and have started working on the July revenue as it comes in. As I said, transfer tax for the year right now is at 33% through today's date versus actually that's not right. It was at 33% through June 30th versus a historic 26% average. So that revenue stream is currently tracking slightly ahead. Accommodations tax, like I said, is tracking slightly ahead, but I believe it's just the carryover from last year. Rental licenses, the revenue from that is in the ballpark. It's tracking at 58% versus a historic 50 or 47%. But again, I think some people delayed getting their licenses because they weren't sure whether they were going to have a rental season or not. Commercial business stuff, commercial business licenses are on target. Dawn has been doing a lot of work to make sure all of our contractors are getting their licenses. People have been giving us a heads up of questions if they don't think somebody is licensed. So there's ongoing follow-up that happens with that. Seasonal parking permits, as I said, today we're at roughly 85.4%. We expect a little bit more money in the month of July, but by the end of July, the seasonal sales are pretty much done. So we will end up somewhere between the 85.4 and probably the 90%. I don't think we'll get to the 95%, at least under the current conditions. Parking meters, as I said, there was a large deposit that was happening this afternoon. So those numbers will be updated by Monday at the end of the day. The number of 113 estimated about $110,000 of Park Mobile revenue that was coming in. If you look at the notes that were sent out in the Excel sheet, the beach fire permits, I'm sorry, if you go back to the parking meters, it's the same thing. There's a delay in the receipts, but the revenues seem to be picking up from those. And while our businesses, I think Vince was right, the businesses had a relatively poor weekend. Our parking meters did reasonably well the past weekend because the beach was busy. The building permits, right now, those are kind of tracking right on our expectations. I know that we are working with several property owners on some demolitions and future buildings. So those things will be coming in as we progress through the budget year. At least that's our expectation at this point. Beach fire permits have been strong. That revenue has picked up. Dog licensing is reasonably on track with our expectations this year. And the parking ticket revenue is starting to increase, but is again lagging behind right now. And we have to keep a strong eye on those numbers. So I think we are still in the most likely target area between the base case and the best case. And that's assuming that we don't take any more hits on things that are happening. Obviously, the weather is important to us. Favorable weather helps us. And again, I would remind everybody, we had done the meter increase, but we did not fully estimate that meter increase into the budget. So it's possible that if we have strong revenue in the coin and Park Mobile section, that may get us close to our targets on budget, but that's yet to be determined at this point.
Thank you, Town Manager. I have one question, and I'd like to go to Commissioner Moskowitz. He had his hand up. Have we had any luck in resolving the problem that the police are only writing paper tickets and not able to use the equipment? I mean, I know you said pretty much that there was no solution because of the problems of training and that we had 2 or 3 code enforcement people that were using the ticket equipment, the photographs, et cetera. But is there any change on that? Is there any way to help solve that?
There's been a little bit of progress, but nothing substantial to report right at this moment. So,
okay, Commissioner Moskowitz.
Well, yeah, your question was my question, because I think for us to have a successful budget year, we need to get on that cross training and everyone working together on that enforcement, because that number is a little bit troublesome.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Persinger.
It's just a comment. I mean, I've been looking at this, we've all been looking at this for the last 2 or 3 months, and I still think we're probably going to come in somewhere around 400,000 to 4.25 short in terms of revenue. The big unknown is accommodations taxes. And the unfortunate thing is we're not going to know until the very end, really where we are, I think. I mean, I guess we'll get some signal in October, but we're going to be pretty far down the line before we really know what's going to happen with accommodations. So I think we keep our fingers crossed, hope that this quarantine effect that other states have imposed on this isn't too impactful. But again, I still think we're going to be, and this is consistent with what the town manager said, in between the 2 scenarios, I think we'll be around 400 to 4.25 short.
Thank you, Commissioner. Just a comment that I would have and would like the town manager to address. I talked to him earlier this week about the intern we have. We do still have that intern working on that rental license versus accommodation tax versus VRBO, et cetera. Mr. Koenig, could you give a little update on that, on the intern?
yes, so we have an undergraduate fellow from the University of Delaware that is under a summer fellows contract to review our ordinance, how we implement our ordinance. And what he and I talk about is developing a kind of a playbook for public relations. How do we improve the ordinance? We talked about some GIS mapping of rental licenses using some free software and being able to publish stuff out there. And he is doing research on penalties. He's also done some research on the VRBO and Airbnb platforms. He's done some polling of things to see what's available and prices. And we'll be making at the end a recommendation of what we believe is going to be some ordinance changes for the commissioners to consider, some additional PR stuff that we could do to get people familiar with what's going on and how the tax is collected and when it's due, how you actually calculate it, what your responsibility is, what penalty should be in place for non-compliance. There are some communities that, in addition to the rent, they consider as revenue non-refundable pet deposits, cleaning fees, all that stuff, in addition to the flat rent that the tax in some communities is based on adding all those things in. And so we'll have some comparisons to make and some decisions to make when he's done with his report and makes his presentation.
Well, I would urge you to also understand that, and I know you've heard this from me before, and I apologize if I bore everybody with it, but we previously had somebody who started calling people and saying, you know, don't forget accommodations tax. We see online you've rented X amount of weeks at X price, and don't forget the accommodation tax that has to be passed through to the town. So I would hope that we would start also doing some of that at the proper time. And no comment needed. I know you're getting tired of hearing me say that. So, is there any other comments or questions from the commissioners? Hearing none, we'll move on. Item number 5, discussion regarding Chapter 147, Taxation, Article 2, Beach Assessment Tax. And by the way, have you realized that this is a beach assessment tax, not a beach replenishment tax? The proper title is beach assessment. Go ahead, Town Manager.
Thank you. This is the request to pick up a discussion that we briefly had last summer. And then my understanding was there was work done years ago that brought it all the way up to the council level, but brought it short of a vote to potentially amend the existing ordinance. So the beach assessment tax was authorized through Chapter 167 of the Town of Dewey Beach Code. And therefore, my understanding is that we can make amendments or changes to this part of the code without having to get state approval. And so this is the local decision-making component of this. In part of the submission, it included the Chapter 167 language with respect to rate collection, enforcement, and appeals. And in the ordinance, the current language reads, all property situated in the town shall be liable to taxation and assessment for public purposes related exclusively to beach and dune replacement, repair, maintenance, and administrative expenses directly related thereto. And so, depending on whether you're a strict constructionist and read it as plain language, or you read different things into the language, right now, we roughly collect, and there's a separate attachment for it, I would say in the neighborhood of $190,000 a year. If you look at it, there was an attachment that in FY17, we collected 192,000, FY18, 195, FY19, 194, and FY20, 193. The number fluctuates slightly, and I think that's really related to penalties and late fees more so than there's not really a decline in real property or anything like that in the town. So if you go back to the prior discussion, one of the things that the beach assessment tax, it has been called the Beach Replenishment Fund, and it's been looked at by some as the only thing that those expenditures could be used for were for beach replenishment, and that we had to save money for beach replenishment. In reality, every year we charge the beach grooming under, I think, the maintenance requirement to the beach assessment tax fund. So in each of the last fiscal years, in FY18, we charged just under $74,000 to the account for expenditures related to beach cleaning. In FY19, we did just under $63,000. In FY20, it was just under $66,000. And then so far this year, it's been just at about $23,000, a portion of the way through the summer. So there are expenditures that are being charged against the beach assessment tax related to maintenance of the beach. I think at one time there may have been some administrative expenses that were charged, but at least the last 3 budgets, there has not been an administrative charge to the fund. And it may go back years before that, since the last time there was an administrative charge placed on the fund. The language that I would like the commissioners to consider expand what would be a qualified expenditure for the tax. And the language would read as, all real property situated in the town shall be liable to taxation and assessment for public purposes related exclusively to the ocean and bay beaches, dune replacement, repair, maintenance, safety, security, sanitation, and administrative expenses directly related thereto. And this would be for future assessments. It would not be looking back on existing revenues collected. So if the commissioners were willing to amend the language, that language would not be in place for charging against it until the FY22 budget year, in my opinion, at least, because we're in the current collection year right now. I would not recommend that you change anything in the middle of a collection year. This language change would expand the scope of the purpose to include the Bayside beaches, and it would allow, if the commissioners so chose to do, to charge expenses related to the lifeguards, the life-saving station, trash collection along the beaches against the tax collection. And the argument that I would make with respect to this issue really is that this would create a dedicated funding source for the asset that we probably have the most interest in Dewey Beach. The beach improvement and the management of the beach is probably one of the most important services that we have out there. The rate right now is, I think, 40 cents. And the code specifically says that the commissioners could take it up 20%. I believe the rate has been the same since it was implemented a number of years ago and has never been adjusted upward. And then you would reach a cap at 48 cents and could go no higher unless you went to referendum, according to the current language. So the first discussion I think that would be appropriate is to have a discussion about whether the language should be modified or not. And then we could go from there with additional questions.
Well, commissioners, I will call on Commissioner Moskowitz after I make a comment because he had his hand up, and then Commissioner Persinger. So town manager, you would add to the discussion language, you would add to the ocean and bay beaches and add safety, security, and sanitation to what's there presently.
Yes.
Yes. And commissioners, I would remind you, this is just a discussion item. This is not a discuss and vote. And you have a lot of options here. You could not change the language at all if you felt it was unnecessary. You could change the language to the suggestions that the town manager has given you, or you could change the items that the town manager has suggested, either adding or subtracting items, and change the language. So you have a lot of options. This is just discussion. I'll go to Commissioner Moskowitz and then Commissioner Persinger.
Yeah, when you run an HOA, you have operational and capital charges. This money, the beach replenishment account, is for capital charges for the beach.
It's not a beach replenishment account.
The beach tax account, or
assessment account.
Beach assessment account.
Yeah.
And once the corp's contract is up, we have the money for maybe one and a little bit of beach replenishment. That's the lifeblood of the town. To use it for the Bayside and lifeguards makes it a backdoor property tax and a way to read the incoming money. And instead of growing it, so we have more for beach replenishments. And when you take away that money from the asset we have the most interest in, that's actually destroying the beach if you take away that money. This was passed by referendum, that any working should only be changed by referendum. We may have an ability to change it, but there's no way it should be changed without a referendum.
Thank you, Commissioner. Mr. Koenig, would you like to address that? And then we'll go to Commissioner Persinger and then Commissioner Bauer each.
Yes. I don't think we can consider this a capital account because we charge grooming maintenance to the account. So we cannot sit here and say this is only a capital account. Otherwise, we would be in conflict with how we're using it currently and have been using it for many years.
Commissioner Persinger, by the way, we also do administration and have for many years and only got changed without commissioner's consent by a previous town manager. Commissioner Persinger, go ahead.
I would not like to consider any changes in this language without substantial public input, including the possibility of a public hearing. This has been a long-standing practice. And I think it needs to be clear what the effects of this would be. As Commissioner Moskowitz just pointed out, we would be shifting expenses that are right now part of our current operating budget and charging them against this, this tax. You know, you call it what you want, but in essence, I tend to agree that this is a backdoor to a property tax. And that's something that the property owners and voters of the town have been very staunchly against for quite some time. So I think they need to understand how we're expanding this and paying for expenses in the current operating budget and taking those and charging them against the tax. I think it's also important to know, first of all, we need to establish, I'm not even sure what our obligations are with respect to the Bay Beaches. We saw a draft of the regulations and requirements for the Bay Beaches, but we never came to any agreement on that.
Right.
There was certainly some indication in there that the town would have some responsibilities, that DBE would have some responsibilities. There would be some things that are shared. I don't know how that all shaked out. And then finally, I think it would be important for people to understand that we would no longer be contributing to the beach assessment fund, the restricted fund. If you look at the lifeguard expenditures and how much we spend every year, it would be very easy to more than eat up that $190,000. And in fact, if we added another 20%, the $228,000, we could more than eat that up just by charging all the lifeguard expenditures against that. So I think people would need to understand that there would be no addition from 2022 forward to that beach restricted account.
Thank you, Commissioner. Town Manager.
So Commissioner Persinger, my response to that is only that it was not my intent to use the entirety of this fund for operational issues, that there could be some type of mixture that says, okay, of the $195,000 that we collect, you know, 100 goes to replenishment into the account, 70 goes to the grooming of the beach, and 25 goes to safety. It was not meant to say that this entire fund was going to be gobbled up related to maintenance.
Thank you, Town Manager. Commissioner Bauer.
Yeah, I mean, this is a very passionate issue for a lot of people, how this money gets used. And, you know, the original referendum on this thing, you know, we have to follow that, you know, the spirit of what was approved by the people, right? I mean, we don't want to be changing what the people told us we could do. Scott brought up something that's really making me curious now. Scott, you mentioned that in the past, other funds were charged back to this in past years.
When you say there was, I think at some point there was some administrative costs that were charged against this.
When was that?
I'd have to go back. It's more than 5 budget cycles ago.
Before the previous town manager.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think that needs to be public. If we did, I mean, we're talking about not even vote, you know, whether we're going to vote on it, but if something was done illegally 5 years ago,
No.
I think that needs to be public. No?
Don't use that word. Nobody's even insinuated that. That's
Right.
under the present law. Present said beach and dune replacement, repair, maintenance, and administrative expenses directly related thereto.
Yeah, but I'd like to know, just so we're transparent, what in the past, what was charged back against this account? All the people that approve this thing are going to go crazy that we're discussing this now. And I'm not, hey, if there was something, let's be transparent.
Oh, it was back then.
Okay.
It was absolutely, it was a part of the administration salary of one clerk that had to handle all the beach paperwork, et cetera.
I'd like the specifics on it. That's all I'm asking for.
It says that in the present rule.
Right.
Right.
So
Okay.
let's be all out in the open on it. That's all.
Of course we are.
Of course.
And not insinuate any differently.
Me neither.
Commissioner Jazinski.
Yeah, so, regardless of the specific language in here, the citizens of Dewey and the taxpayers of Dewey clearly view this tax as a beach nourishment tax. And our safety plan, if funding for beach nourishment dries up such that we can be sure to maintain our beach going forward. That's how it was sold to them. I'm not saying that our town manager's plan is not without merit. We have a substantial balance in that account after all of these years, but if we're going to start spending it, what I would just call operationally, even though a number of years ago we kind of started down the slippery slope with beach cleaning operationally, we need to take it back to the voters. And it's unfortunate that this is coming up in July because I don't think we have time to really kind of do the due diligence and let people think about this, before the September election. But I think that there is merit in asking people at this point in time what they want to see going forward for both the existing monies that are on account as well as additional monies we collect under this tax.
Thank you, Commissioner. Town Manager.
Just so everybody, I think, is on the same page, Dewey Beach is the only town that collects a tax similar to this. No other coastal town, to my knowledge, collects this tax. And while the state would love for us to contribute to the replenishment, the position, I think, of the coastal towns is that the beach is it's a statewide public asset, and the beach economy contributes so much to the state that individual towns should not have to make the local match. So the Corps considers, the Corps requires I think it's a 30% local match. I could be wrong on the percentage, but that local match can be made by the state, it can be made by the county, or it could be made by individual municipalities. And I know, at least the time that I've been in Dewey Beach, my position has been that there's no way that the town of Dewey Beach should have to put their funds in if no one else is doing it. And in fact, they should go to the state, the county, and then the municipalities last, because the sand migrates. We can't confirm that the sand that's laid in Dewey Beach stays in Dewey Beach for any amount of time. And that as the Cape region, we should be advocating for the state's help, the county's help, so that we do not have to, as individual small municipalities, and we're all small municipalities down here, have to contribute dollars for the beach replenishment, because the return is really to the state and the county, some to the individual municipalities, but we really don't want to be in a position to ever have to turn this money over to a dredging contract. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't, be prepared to do that. I'm saying that we should do everything that we can so that we never, ever have to do that.
Thank you very much. I'm next, Commissioner. Yeah, thank you. I have to be careful what I say, because we tend to use terms that we should not use when we start talking in public. And there have been many myths, MYTHS, it's hard for me to say that with a list, many myths about this subject in town. I am not necessarily for or against this. I think there's some very good pros and cons about both sides of this issue. But to start using terms like illegal or slippery slope or oh, we have to go to the state, it's required. That's not required. None of it was illegal, and nobody started down any slippery slope. It specifically says administrative expenses, repair and maintenance. And so we didn't start down a slippery slope, and nothing was done illegally, and everything was absolutely public back in those days. It happened before me and it continued after me. And it got changed by a town manager without the vote of the commissioners. He just stopped charging off the administrative fee. So nothing other than the change was done not in public. Everything was done according to the regulation that governs this loan or this fund. So I'm not saying let's do it. I'm saying let's discuss it and say, do we have some alternatives? So there's my stand on the matter. Commissioner Moskowitz, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I've been a frequent attendee of the SCAT meeting, which is Sussex County Association of Towns, and they have breakfast steering meetings. They actually had one this morning. And what the town manager said, in theory, could hold, but you just don't know. It depends on many things. One variable is the federal government. We have a corpse contract with the federal government, and I believe it expires in 20 years, or like the state does. In 20 years, the federal government could say, well, now we're charging the state or the towns a different price or whatever. We don't know. That's a variable 20 years down the road. The other variable is what the state does. And other towns have approached me and they're envious of us having a balance. And they've been actually talking about getting a balance. So while we're the only town to have it, we're actually the shining example. And we don't know what the state will do. We don't know what the federal government will do. And we don't know what the county does. And this protects us and our kids and grandkids from having Dewey Beach and not having the town go under 20 years from now if the town has to be responsible for their own beach replenishment. We all we know is what we can control. And we don't know what the rest of the governments will do.
Well, this has certainly been a good discussion. Commissioner Persinger.
Yeah, just quickly, I think the town manager makes some very good arguments, but they're all arguments that need to be aired in public. I mean, I think this is an issue that should be more than a single meeting issue. We need to get as much input as possible. And I think in the situation we're in right now, I don't think we have a clue who's going to have any money. The federal government is bleeding money, the state's bleeding money, the county is bleeding money, and so are we. So I think, we need to have a good, solid public discussion about what kind of risk we're willing to take with respect to the biggest asset that we have in Dewey Beach.
That's just why this is only a discussion item. It definitely would take maybe more than another meeting. It should be another meeting, in my mind, just to discuss, and one after that to possibly vote. Maybe nothing to vote on. So, is there any other commissioners that haven't spoken a second time on this? Commissioner Moskowitz, you had your hand up again.
I just want to add one point. As we discussed, it's not like this asset is just sitting away and not earning interest. In the last 5 years, as of like February and March, it's earned about a good 800 something grand. So it's growing and it's invested properly. So it is earning money as we figure out what to do with this asset, so to speak.
Thank you, Commissioner. Town manager.
I just want to reiterate what I said before. My comments and my recommendations have nothing to do with the current balance in this fund. It is how this fund is treated going forward if the commissioners were to amend the actual code. It has nothing to do with the $5 million that's in the bank right now.
Thank you, Town Manager. Anybody else want to make the last comment at this time? Thank you. Let's move on to the next item. Discuss and possibly vote to approve an ordinance to amend the fee for conditional use applications submitted by in-town businesses. Number one, it has been suggested that there is presently, a $750 fee conditional use hearing. It has been suggested that if people wanted present businesses in town that want to change some of their conditional uses, that is those conditional uses that are not not part of other laws in town, not covered by our code, such as decks, music on decks, et cetera. That's part of the code. That's not something that could be changed as a conditional use. But it was been suggested by Commissioner Moskowitz that we move to a $400 fee, and the suggestion before you includes a $500 fee. So that would be a reduction. If it were a $400 fee, it would be a reduction in 53% or of 53%, or excuse me, to 53%, a 47% cut. And if it were $500, it would be reduced to 67% of the fee, or a 43% cut. So it is discussed and possibly vote to approve an ordinance to amend the fee. So Commissioner Moskowitz, you brought this up at previous suggestions of the town manager. Would you want to speak first?
Yeah, I just think if you're a small business in town, it makes sense that, as the solicitor said at the last meeting, many small businesses or any business will take something they may not agree with to try to prove themselves. A good example was Dewey Bear Company. They chose to do an 11 p.m. closing time, and then they came before the commissioners 2-3 years later, and it got amended to 1 a.m. And it's an expense on the business, but it's also an expense on the town having to have the solicitor, town manager, and staff. So I just think the easiest way is if I could do a motion to approve the ordinance and split it down the middle with a $450 fee.
Commissioner, if you would hold your motion until
Okay.
some other people get to talk, and then we'll also discuss after you make a motion, if that's all right with you.
Okay, but I'll hold my motion, but I just think it just makes sense to be have a great business climate for all the small businesses in Dewey.
Let's just see if, does anybody, any other commissioner have any comment at this time? Commissioner Persinger.
Yeah, I would just point out that what this ordinance does is actually make it worse in some cases, because we do not now have any requirement that you have to wait for 12 months before you can come back to amend your conditional use. So that's an additional requirement that we're imposing. I think we should make that clear.
Yes, sir.
I would have left it at $400 as opposed to $500. I think that makes a little more difference. I'm not sure that 500 is enough of a difference. But more importantly for me, I began to stumble over this when I tried to think through what it meant by amending a conditional use, existing conditional use permit. Commissioner Moskowitz had an example. You have a business who has imposed upon it a particular requirement that commissioners believe is necessary, like an earlier closing time, and perhaps similar businesses are subject to. And so for a period of time, that business is subject to it, and then comes back and wants to change that requirement or eliminate that requirement, or at least make it consistent with the way other businesses are operating. I think that was the original concept behind this. But what if you're a business who, let's say you're a restaurant and you want to rearrange your seating area within your restaurant? You have to come back for a conditional use permit. Would you do that for just $400 or $500? What if you want to completely redo the interior of your restaurant space? You want to change the size of the bar area. You want to change the size of the dining area. You have to come back for a conditional use approval. Is that subject to $500 or $750? I don't think we have a clear idea of what we mean by amending an existing conditional use permit, and which ones would be subject to 500 versus which, we really should legitimately charge $750 because there's a very long process we would have to go through in order to approve it.
I'm sorry, Commissioner, I apologize. I didn't quite understand that part of the statement. Are you saying should or should not leave it at 750? Should or should not have it at 500? Should or should not?
I'm just saying, I don't think we know what should be subject to 750 versus 500 or 400. You've got a range of possible amendments here, and some are going to be much more complicated than others. What if somebody just wants to expand space to the next the next unit. We've had a couple of those in town. Is that amending? I think that's amending your existing conditional use, but I suspect we wouldn't think that would be subject to a reduced rate because it's, again, a very involved process that you have to go through. And so the 750 would certainly be justified. So I guess I'm not sure that we're ready to vote on this because I'm not sure what existing conditional use permits it should apply to.
Thank you, Commissioner. The town attorney had his hand up.
I just wanted to clarify that this ordinance is not intended to prohibit someone from coming back with a permit to have it amended within 12 months from when it was last issued. This just says that in order to be eligible for the reduced fee, you'd have to wait at least 12 months since your conditional use permit was last amended or granted.
Fair point.
Just a clarification.
Fair point.
But,
Thank you very much.
but as to when a conditional use permit is being amended versus granted, I mean, I think this subject came up at the last discussion, but the vast majority of these conditional use permit applications that we get are in the form of amendments rather than initial grantings of conditional uses. I believe that's the case historically, that they get traded. Existing permit holders sell them, new proprietors come in and they ask for amendments. So under that scenario, it'd be more likely that the reduced fee would be charged if this ordinance were passed.
Remember, I'm going to go to Commissioner Jazinski, but remember this, that we're commenting before the motion has been brought forward. You'll still have chances to comment when the motion is either seconded or not. So Commissioner Jazinski.
Well, thank you. I could comment at either point. I just see this as being something to try to help the businesses out a bit who have to go back to get certain types of changes because of the way we regulate things. And it's not going to make a big difference in terms of the town's overall revenue because we're just talking about, reducing it by, $250 or $300. And I think we should just, decide if we want to do this or not do it. I don't think it's really all that involved.
Is there, okay, before the vote, before the motion here, go ahead, Commissioner Bauer. Your mic is not on, Commissioner.
Yeah, I'd like to see this reduced. Businesses, this isn't a good time for them to be paying a lot of money on stuff. And I went through that big green book we have of all the ordinances we've passed over the last 30 years. And, some of them, they're going to want change. So I think we need to be a little more business friendly on it. That would be my opinion.
And for the last pre-motion comment, I would remind everyone, how the heck do you think we run this town? We run this town by bits and pieces. We run this town by $100 permits and $15 or $35 tickets and business license fees. And we're hurting, this town is hurting as much as all the businesses are hurting. Now, I agree that I might vote for this, but I think the time is not yet there to change it. I think we need to discuss it more and more information has to be brought forward as to how it would affect the businesses and how many people are asking for such a change and how many people would benefit from such a change and how it would hurt the town's income. So I would just ask you to remember that when you think about it. Commissioner Moskowitz, you have a motion? Your mic, Commissioner Moskowitz.
Can I ask the solicitor one question?
Yes, sir, absolutely.
Would we be able to add to the motion, basically, to prohibit the discount applying from a license transfer? Like after a license transfer, someone sells the business and then goes to amend, they would have to pay the original price. Is there a way to clarify that to address the concern raised?
Town attorney.
Well, are we here to vote on this tonight?
Yeah.
Well, it says discuss and vote.
Yeah, okay.
And there has been no motion yet, sir. It's just a question to you.
So I would say that while we can't conditional use permits on who it is that is the owner, we probably can require that any amendment brought by a transferee is not subject to discount.
Town attorney? Town attorney?
Yes.
I'm sorry, town manager.
I'm not sure why we would want to add that in and make it more complicated. It's just straightforward. If there's a revision that's asked for, regardless of who has the conditional use, then they can make the application. Otherwise, I'm not sure what the usefulness of this is going to be.
Commissioner Moskowitz, do you have a motion?
Yeah, I'm just going to motion to approve the ordinance to amend the fee for conditional use application submitted by the in-town businesses. And we'll do, as a compromise, do $500.
Is there a second to the motion? Is there a second to the motion?
This is Dave. I'll second it.
Commissioner Jazinski has seconded the motion. Is there any more public comment? Anybody raise their hand that wants to comment? I'll let the maker of the motion comment first. Please make it quickly.
Well, I'll defer to the others to hear their feedback.
Okay, Commissioner Persinger, you had your hand up?
Well, I just want to make sure that I heard the town attorney correctly. If I understood him correctly, a business that wants to remove a requirement imposed by the commissioners, let's say closing time, they want to have their closing time changed. They would qualify for the reduced fee, as would a business who wants to completely revamp its entire interior of its business, rearrange its seating, perhaps build a different bar area. That would also qualify for this reduced fee, just the same as the other situation would. Is that correct? That full range.
Yes, there's no language in here which draws a distinction between those two scenarios.
Okay. Then I have trouble seeing the justification for the reduced fee in the latter case.
Commissioner Moskowitz.
So is there language the solicitor could suggest that would differentiate between the two? Between floor plans and a simple conditional use?
Well, I wouldn't be comfortable trying to do that in this setting. So if there was support for that kind of notion, then I think we need to table this and bring it back at another time. But wherever you draw that line in terms of trying to describe what triggers the higher fee versus the lower fee, it's going to be somewhat of a gray area, and it's going to be hard for me to come up with language that's easily interpreted that directs us to collect either $750 or $500.
Commissioner Bauer, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I mean, I like what Fred just mentioned here. I'd be in favor of tabling it if the motions would be withdrawn.
Are you making a motion to table?
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion to table.
Town attorney, does that require a second?
Yes.
Motion, is there a second to motion to table?
I'll second.
There's a motion to table and a second. And as I understand it, town attorney, we now take a vote on the motion to table first.
Absolutely. The motion to table takes precedence over the prior motion.
Okay, I will call off roll call and ask you how you vote on a motion to table. Commissioner Moskowitz.
No, I believe we should have a motion to table till August, not just a motion to table.
So, Commissioner Persinger.
Commissioner Persinger votes aye.
Commissioner Bauer.
I vote aye.
Commissioner Jazinski.
Aye, it's fine.
And Commissioner Cook, Mayor Cook votes aye. The motion has been tabled. It can be brought back up at another time.
Oh, but there's no guarantee. That's the issue.
That's correct. Next item, number 7, discuss and possibly vote to approve members of the election officials for the September 26, 2020 Town of Dewey Beach municipal election. All of you have been sent the election officials' names and background. Rick Berlin, Ellen Danaher, Robert Day, Stephen Eckerman, Susan Trencher. And for the sake of time, Attorney Townsend, can we have the option of doing these one at a time or all together? Is that correct?
I think you can move, someone could move the slate of appointees. Any one of the members of council, though, could object to that, in which case they need to be done individually.
Commissioner Bauer,
Yeah, I'd like the motion to approve the whole slate.
is there a second to the motion? Is there a second to the motion to approve all?
I second Commissioner Jazinski.
Jazinski seconds the motion. There's a proper motion and second on the floor. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll do a roll call vote. Commissioner Moskowitz,
Aye.
Commissioner Persinger,
Aye.
almost said Commissioner Koenig, Commissioner Bauer,
Aye.
Commissioner Jazinski,
Aye.
Commissioner Mayor Cook says aye, passed unanimously. Number 8, town manager comments.
The only comment I had was an issue I should have brought up earlier related to, we've temporarily removed the public trash containers on King Charles because we're having problems with people filling them with trash from their homes or their businesses. And we really can't even determine whether they're people that are actually from Dewey Beach or not. So they've been temporarily removed. We're going to monitor it and see if they need to be put back. But if anybody asks you questions, they were purposely removed.
It's a great concept and they were used properly for many years, but we've gotten to the point where some people from outside and a lot of people from Dewey are using it as their trash pickup instead of as a general public trash as they walk the streets. So before we go to commissioner comments, do we want to discuss the next town meeting? Is there any thoughts on the next town meeting? Commissioner Jazinski.
The only thing I was going to suggest is if it works schedule-wise for everybody, that we move it up just by 1 week. Just from a budget perspective, I think that 1 week might just help us a bit.
Well, I might suggest also that we stick to the regular town meeting schedule, but if we want to add a meeting, we add a meeting. That's my suggestion. Commissioner Moskowitz.
Yeah, I agree with Commissioner Jazinski. I think just move it. We don't need an extra town meeting right now. Just move it up a week to August 7th. So this way we save one less meeting, but we can cover some extra ground as new developments happen.
Commissioner Persinger.
But you may also risk not having the audit report ready for consideration.
That's a
I
good
think we
point.
need that
Yeah.
time.
Thank you, Commissioner Persinger. I just, again, I like to see people get used to, our town citizens get used to a time and place, and we've thrown them off a little bit already by the time and the place because of having to do it by Zoom. So I hate to change the date also on any regular basis. They get used to it. They know when to comment to commissioners. I would hope we just add a meeting instead of taking away a meeting. But any other comments from everybody? I'm against moving the meeting a week forward. I'm for adding a meeting. Any comments to that? Commissioner Persinger.
I would be in favor of adding a meeting.
Commissioner Bauer.
I'd be in favor of adding a meeting as well.
That's 2, and I'm in favor of adding a meeting. So Commissioner Moskowitz.
And can I suggest the 24th?
You want to add a meeting on the 24th?
Well, to keep it between the symmetry between that and the next meeting. Or during the week of the 27th, whichever. But it seems like we've been doing every 2 weeks, so the 24th would be natural.
Well,
So the 24th and the 27th have been mentioned. Anybody have any request for either one? I'm good for either one.
It was gonna be one of those 2 dates. I prefer the 24th.
I'm good for either one. Commissioner Bauer, how about you?
Yeah, I'm good with either one. I just request that we do it late in the afternoon.
Okay, I agree with you. Commissioner Persinger, your choice.
I really have no information at this time to select between the two, so either one.
So Commissioner Moskowitz, and you have a comment?
Yeah, just the 24th seems better for everyone.
Well, it seems like we don't need to take a vote on this, but it seems like the 24th in the afternoon, late afternoon would serve a purpose. Commissioner Bauer, your light's gone out on, oh, there you go. There you go. Now we see you.
You see me? I don't know why.
So the 24th in the late afternoon, I'll get a time together and a date together and notify you guys. Remember, we have an executive session after this meeting. We're going to go to commissioner comments right now. And then I hope with Ashley to take a break for just a couple minutes so we can go to the bathroom, so we can have a drink of water or something, and then come back. And Ashley is, as I wrote you just before this meeting, Ashley is going to be in on our executive session because she keeps us up on the screen here, and we would have to probably go to audio if we didn't have her with us. So we're going to, unless there's any problem with that, and the town attorney says legally there's no problem. So now we'll go to commissioner comment. Commissioner Bauer.
No comments.
No comment? Wow. Commissioner Jazinski.
No comments.
Wow, very good. Commissioner Moskowitz.
Yeah, just for the beach wheelchairs, I really think GoFundMe, the business owners are hurting, but we have a lot of visitors, we have property owners, and a lot of people would contribute, and it saves the work of town hall. Instead of having to call town hall and mail in a check, you just go to GoFundMe.com. We really should consider it. The emergency response plan we still need to do. We had a tropical storm of some sort today, or almost did. Imagine we have a hurricane. We really need to get that emergency response plan. And then other thing is with Route 1, we need to get on Del Dot to finish the work. There's still some crosswalks and lights that they have yet to finish. So and also I like on my block, that red light sign needs to be corrected. It should be no turn on red with the exception of pedestrians or bicycle. It confuses a lot of people just seeing no turn on red, and then you have to see at the very bottom, except if there's a bicyclist or something. It's just a confusing sign.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Persinger.
I have no comments.
I have just one general comment, and then we'll move into a break so Ashley can, or we'll go into executive session so Ashley can cut everybody else out except us. To the people that are watching and to the people that listen to this later on, the citizens of town, these commissioners are doing a damn good job for this town. These commissioners love this town, and I'm not exaggerating. I'm not being sloppy. I'm not being emotional, but the commissioners love this town. That's why they volunteered to run for the job. Believe me, we don't get paid. If we did it for the income, we're losing income on this. We're not doing it to hurt anybody. We're all doing it to help somebody. So please, we went through a very controversial mask ordinance at the beginning of the session. Please write me. Tell me you disagree. Tell me you agree. But don't tell me how dare you commissioners do this, or how dare you commissioners do that, or you commissioners don't care about the welfare of the citizens. These commissioners sitting here today and this mayor sitting here today care about the health and welfare of the entire town. So I'll answer you if you say you disagree. I won't answer you if you say we're not taking care of the town, or that we're only looking out for our own welfare or something along that line. So with that comment, thank you all very much for being here. To the commissioners, please hold on.